Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Port Phillip City Council. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners of this land, the people of the Kulin Nations. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continued relationship to this land. This meeting is being conducted in a hybrid style and is streamed via Council's webcast page and Facebook Live. Streams and recordings of Council meetings are copyrighted and cannot be altered, reproduced, or republished without the permission of Council. If we experience any technical difficulties this evening, we will adjourn the meeting for a short time to resolve the issue. I remind attendees that any member of the public addressing Council must extend due courtesy and respect to Council and the process under which it operates, and must take direction from the Chair whenever called on to do so. Speakers must remain respectful, and statements or questions must not be defamatory, offensive, or objectionable, aimed at embarrassing a councillor or a member of Council staff, or relate to a matter outside the powers of Council. I also ask attendees if you have any documentation that you want distributed to councillors in relation to tonight's agenda, please provide this to the governance team near the door and they'll take care of giving it to us. Or you can always email us as well. Please don't approach councillors at their desk during the meeting. First item are apologies. Councillors, I see that we have Councillor Baxter and Councillor Clark online, and the rest are present, so there are no apologies. On to minutes of previous meetings. The minutes of the special meeting on the 14th of May 2024 and the council meeting of 15th May 2024 have been circulated. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? No, if not, can I have a motion to confirm these minutes? And thank you, Councillor Crawford, second by Councillor Martin. Thank you. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. On to declaration of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting? No. All right, on to public question time and submissions. So we'll now hear from the public asking questions and submissions of the agenda tonight. Under Council governance rules, questions can only be asked about items not on the agenda. Therefore, if you're speaking to an agenda item tonight, please note I will not refer these questions to an officer for a response. However, a councillor may wish to take up the question on your behalf when the item is considered. All right, I think there's... Oh, how many blue sheets do I have? All right, so roughly 23 people tonight, so we are going to go to 2 minutes each. Some are on virtual. Do we have Simon Spain online already? Simon's joining us online.
Yes, you do.
Question. Hi, Simon. Name, suburb, and you have 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Simon Spain, South Melbourne. I have questions I'll ask in bulk just to clarify some confusion over Park Street, South Melbourne. Last meeting on 15th of May, it was stated Park Street Tramlink was waiting on state government. However, there is reference to the Park Street in tonight's agenda. Can Council clearly define all state and council-run projects in Park Street, South Melbourne? Can Council delineate the roles and responsibilities of the key stakeholders or advise the which stakeholder has what project, state or council, to each project? Would there be any impact to the Park Street landscape project by the tramlink, potentially resulting in rework and additional costs? Is there any overlap between any of the projects run in Park Street, South Melbourne and any double-up in costs? And would it be more cost efficient to combine all projects into one to maximise spend and reduce costs? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll refer to Fiona Vanderhoeven. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those questions. Through you, Mayor, I can advise that there are in fact 2 separate projects that are occurring on Park Street, and can understand that there may be some confusion out there at the moment. One project is the Park Street Streetscape Improvement project, and that one aims to create safe, connected and a refreshed streetscape for those living in nearby and travelling through Park Street. This applies to Park Street from St Kilda Road down to Kingsway. And at a council meeting on the 2nd of March in 2022, council decided to proceed with detailed design and construction of that project. Detailed design has been completed and procurement is underway. That item is up for consideration that is on council's agenda this evening under confidential matter. The second project is the Park Street Tramlink, and it's a Department of Transport and Planning project. And this seeks to link Park Street Tram line between Heather Street and Kingsway. The timeline for this project is being managed through DTP, and Council has not been advised on a timeline for that project. The projects are progressing independently of each other and are at different stages of implementation and applying to different parts of Park Street. As such, there is efficiencies in carrying on with the current program.
Thank you. Do we have Betty J online? Hi, Betty. Can you hear us?
Thank you, Mayor and Councillor.
Hi, name, suburb, in 2 minutes, please.
Betty J, Park Street, South Melbourne. I have a few questions, which you guys would have got my emails with the attached images. In line with Simon's question, what's happening with Park Street? There's a lot of confusion. Second question is regarding Palmerston Crescent, Kings Place and Millers Lane. When will the parking signs be returned? They were removed over 4 years ago. Looking for some clear parking signs and legal parking return there. Next question is, when will the park open on Albert Road? There's a park that was built there as part of the Metro Tunnel. It's been closed for about 4 months. It's surrounded in cyclone fencing. That fencing blocks off the bike lane, the park, and also probably one of the only existing parking spots in that area. There's about 20 spots that have been literally segregated by some fencing, where my question is, when can we open the park? And if it's not in a hurry, can we move that cyclone fencing back so we can actually use the car parks rather than just look at them?
Thank you, Betty. I'll refer to Fiona for an answer.
Great. Thank you for those questions, Betty. Through you, Mayor, in relation to the parking signs to Palmerston Crescent, Kingsway and on Millers Lane, I can advise that the curbside parking bay along Palmerston Crescent and Kings Place were converted to no stopping zones to accommodate construction activities for the development at 8 Palmerston Crescent. Officers have recently confirmed the completion of construction and will prepare for public parking to be returned. Parking spaces are anticipated to be returned to public parking in 4 weeks. When will in relation to the opening of the park on Albert Road, I can advise that construction is occurring as part of the Metro Tunnel project. That project is being managed by Metro Tunnel Project and delivered by Cross Yarra Partnerships. The area in question is currently managed by Cross Yarra Partnerships, and Council cannot require the area to be open to the public at this stage. Once practical completion has been achieved, works will go through a handover process prior to Council taking receipt of that area, and then once handover has been finalised, CYP will remove the fences and the area will become open to public.
Thank you. All right, in person I have Lauren Shearson asking a question. Hi, Lauren. Do you need assistance there? Are you right?
Yes, thank you.
Hi. Name, suburb, in 2 minutes, please.
Lauren Sherson from Albert Park. What changes are being made to the dog off-leash guidelines as a result of the Have Your Say consultation?
Okay. Dana, are you online? Oh, Dana, can you hear us online? Dana? Maybe, okay, all right. See you.
Through you, Mayor.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I am online.
Yeah.
Through you, Mayor, we are currently looking at the collating all the information from the dog off-leash guideline consultation, and we'll make some updates to the guidelines in relation to that, and it will be brought to a public meeting later on in the year to discuss further.
Okay. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Lauren. Should I do them separate? Yeah, I'll do them separate. Okay. I'll call upon Isaac Herman. Submit a question to Council. Hello, Isaac. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Isaac Herman from Elwood. With regards to our heritage laneways, we have an excellent set of guidelines. Here they are. They're very real. A few months ago, I met with very polite and professional officers whom, even after many years of service, were totally unfamiliar with council policy and guidelines in this area. I was stunned. How did this state of affairs come to be? Who is responsible for council officers in this area to be adequately informed? Why have they failed? Our heritage-owned laneways are falling to criterion determined by asset engineering alone, with next to no consideration for heritage values and specifically zero regard for the original construction methods. Could Council provide a more balanced approach in this regard, with demonstrably more protection for our heritage in line with the Charter for Conservation of Places of Cultural Significance? Other agencies, such as South East Water, that may often conduct work in our laneways, are not required to work to any acceptable heritage standards. Their work devalues our neighbourhoods. Similarly, Melbourne Water has a habit of neglecting our canal bridge infrastructure, such as period balustrading. Will council officers, now that they are aware of council policies and guidelines, make an effort to advise and inspect and hold accountable outside agencies to the required standards? Will council attend to the following heritage concerns that I've specifically reported? Firstly, the increasing dilapidated state of the rotunda in the 1867 designed Albert Park. And secondly, to reinstate the rare bluestone ballard in the laneway by 155 Cecil Street, South Melbourne. And lastly, following South East Water Main's water line renewal along Wave Street, Elwood in 2021, where they butchered the root system of a significant gum tree that resulted in major dieback. This significant habitat tree was the subject of recent council discussions and subsequent pruning. Will Council hold South East Water accountable for the entailed works, considering the decline and pending loss of this very significant and valuable tree? Thank you.
Thank you, Isaac. I'll refer to CEO Chris Carroll.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you, Isaac. There's quite a few questions there. I'm going to take those ones on notice, and what I will also do is get someone from my office to get in contact with you to get a little bit more detail on some of the background, particularly some of those questions around officers, so that I can review that in more detail. So thank you.
Thank you. I call upon Michael Barrett to make a question to Council. Hello, Michael.
Good evening, Mayor. How are you this evening?
Well, thank you.
That's very good. Mayor, I've got two questions in for public question time.
Go for it. Name, suburb, and then...
Michael Barrett from Port Melbourne. I've got two questions for question time. Do you want me to do them back to back, or do you want to call me up after the first one? Keep going? Okay. Actually, I've got first question is to you, Mayor. Regarding the waste disposal contract tendered for and awarded by the City of Port Phillip in 2023, I understand that the Victorian Government Better Regulation Victoria Agency has initiated a preliminary examination into the tender submitted by the contractor citywide to the City of Port Phillip. I believe that one of the initial steps in this examination process is for this regulator to speak to either the CEO or COO or both of the City of Port Phillip. Can the Mayor confirm that these discussions have been had or are scheduled to be had?
Keep going with your questions. I'll come back to the answer.
No problem. The second question is actually, I'll direct it to you, Mayor, but I believe that there's other officers from the Council can answer on this one. I understand that the City of Port Phillip asked for and received a 4 years non-disclosure agreement from the contractor who held the waste disposal contract with the City of Port Phillip up until the 30th of June 2023. Can you confirm that this information is correct, and could you explain the reasons why you believe that this non-disclosure agreement was necessary in the context of this contract? And secondly, regarding the consultant's report into what could best be described as the debacle of the changeover of waste disposal contractors managed by the City of Port Phillip, do you agree that the Council's insistence on the NDA being signed by the previous contractor meant that any assistance offered by the previous contractor to the incoming contractor would have technically have put them in breach of the NDA, and that this in fact exacerbated the severity of the issues encountered by the City of Port Phillip in the changeover of the contractors?
Thank you. I'll first respond the part. Oh, thank you. Okay. I've spoken to the CEO about the first question. No discussion's been had. Nothing scheduled. We haven't heard about this.
Thank you.
Now, before I refer to an officer, I note that you've come to the meeting several times, and the questions are slightly different, but they're of a similar topic. And I'm happy to arrange a meeting to address some of these concerns and questions in a more efficiently way than coming in every other week to keep asking. Would you be interested in that?
Look, thank you very much for the offer, Mayor. This present round of questions closes off my series of questions to Council about that particular issue. So thank you for your offer, but I'll be moving on to other topics after this.
Okay.
I'm sure you're all glad of that. However, I will note in my response that the scale of my questions has now reached the Victorian Government regulator about these particular contracts. So I think it's a good time for me to bow out and hand the discussion over to other parties.
Okay. Well, I'm going to refer to Lachlan Johnson for your other questions.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Michael, for your question. I can confirm that there has never been a non-disclosure agreement executed between Council and the previous waste collection contractor, Four Seasons Waste. This includes prior to 30 June last year or post 30 June 2023 when Citywide commenced. In addition, there was no clause in the previous waste collection contract with Four Seasons Waste that restricted the sharing of information or data between Four Seasons Waste and Citywide. Clause 13 of their contract at the time required them to participate in a transition process.
Thank you. I call upon Peter Holland. Submit a question of Council, please.
Peter Hollands in Kilda. I'm interested in the possibility of U3A courses at the Peanut Farm Sports Pavilion. First of all, what's Council's policy regarding community use of sporting facilities like the Peanut Farm Oval and the future Lagoon Reserve Pavilion? Secondly, who should we deal with? Should we be dealing with council officers, consulting with the sports groups, of course, or directly with the sporting bodies? Thirdly, with the Peanut Farm, we clearly missed an opportunity with the recent renovations to put on a second floor with a multi-function room that could be used by the sporting groups and the community. I know it's a long shot, but is there any thought that we could now put on a second floor or pull that silly building down and build a proper pavilion? And fourthly, can Council provide some general background information on who's funding what, in particular? What's the cost of each pavilion and the oval upgrading? Who pays? Is it, to what extent is it the Council, the State Government, the Sporting Association or the individual clubs? So I have touched base with the U3A and the Footy Club, and they're both on side with U3A using the pavilion at the Peanut Farm, and I hope the Council will be also.
Thanks, Peter. Can I just clarify, because I had the blue form here, were you also, with the blue form for that question?
Sorry?
The blue form that you filled out, was it for that question or you have a separate question?
I had attached.
Yeah, that's what I see, but it's the same thing you emailed as well. Okay, cool. Just making sure. Thank you. All right, so Vicky or Dana? Dana, are you going to take it, please?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Community sports pavilions are considered community facilities and anyone can book them. They're primarily used for sporting use, but there's a large amount of time outside that people can book them. In particular, Peanut Farm is open for that, and Lagoon Reserve intends to have community space as well once that's built. Bookings should be made via Council. They can be made on our website, or if details are left after the Council meeting, we can get in touch. With regards to Peanut Farm Pavilion, the pavilion was upgraded in 2019 and it is not currently scheduled to be changed or modified. Lagoon Reserve, as I said, Lagoon Reserve will have a second story. The upgrade to the sports pavilion at Lagoon Lagoon Reserve Oval is nearing completion, and it will be, Council will have spent around $2.3 million. and the pavilion is expected construction cost around $6 million. We're currently undertaking also site investigations to upgrade the surface at Peanut Farm, and so there's further council investment there. With regards to who funds, projects are prioritised by council and budgeted within council's capital works program. We also get funded through state and federal government, and sporting clubs also contribute to our upgrades of sports facilities.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question from Councillor Bond.
Not a question, but just some additional information. The reason neither Peanut Farm and Murphy's Reserve have second stories is that when the funding was originally granted to us by the state government, a second story at both pavilions was investigated. It was deemed that the existing ground floors and the existing foundations would not support a second story at either building, which is why those options were not pursued.
Thank you. Councillor, CEO?
Through you, Mayor, I think, Peter, you raised a valid point, though. There was learnings as well from those projects, and so and part of those have been put into where we do have opportunities to do a second story and look at how we can better cater for community access. We're now doing that, and Lagoon Reserve is a prime example of that. That community space will be separated from the sporting facilities, separately bookable, and we're looking at how we'd manage that from a council perspective to ensure good access to the community.
Thank you, everyone. All right, I call upon Alex Darton to submit a question to council. Hello, Alex.
Councillors, Mayor, my name's Alex Darton from Elwood. My question is to do with the recently released for feedback minimum standards for rental properties and rooming houses. Will the City of Port Phillip be submitting feedback to the state government for their minimum standards for rental properties and rooming houses? Specifically, with heating and cooling significant factors in making a place livable, there is little incentive currently for owners to improve these. Rental homes, which there's at least 50,000 people in this city that do rent, are less likely to have adequate heating, cooling, and the owner-occupier cooling than owner-occupiers, and social housing even worse off. Feedback closes on the 1st of July.
Thank you. Lauren, are you answering?
Through you, Mayor. Council has not specifically been consulted on the Victorian Government's minimum standards for rental properties and rooming houses. The consultation opened on 3rd of June this year, and we have been in contact with our partner organisations, SECA and CASB, and will be looking to make a joint submission. We note that the changes proposed would be implemented through the Residential Tenancies Act 1997, and that Council does not have jurisdiction under the relevant sections of that Act. Council does separately advocate or plans for improved residential development standards and environmental sustainable design outcomes for all housing options. This includes through the preparation of Council's housing strategy and the Elevating ESD Targets Planning Policy Amendment that is currently with the Minister for Planning for authorisation.
Thank you. Don't get too comfortable, Alex. You're one after this one. So I call upon Simone Britton, speaking to item 7.1, the petition submission for irrigation in Gill Reserve. Hello, Simone.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name's Simone Britton and I'm from Port Melbourne. I am here this evening to address Council in relation to the reserves that run along Tram 109, Hestar, Smith Reserve, Walter Reserve and, of course, Gill Reserve. We recognise that Council has made significant improvements along that area, including tree planting, which has been wonderful, and the installation of irrigation. However, we're here tonight to ask Council to manage Gill Reserve in an equitable manner in the same way the other reserves are being managed, particularly to install irrigation. We residents of Evans Street note that this is not the first time we've had to approach Council and actively pursue the treatment of Gill Reserve in an equitable manner. Previously, it was in relation to the replacement of trees that Council had removed, which we are pleased to report after our submissions and attendance in Council 2011. Those trees were replaced and we residents took active management of the trees that were at issue at that time. We tend to, and participate in the management of Gill Reserve. It is an important reserve for the residents of Evans Street and, of course, for the rapidly growing residential improvements or residential developments that are going on in that area. We seek Council to install irrigation in Gill Reserve and consistent with the use of the area which was originally designated for ball games. Sometime in, I think, 2010, Council, of course, may know the precise details, consultation was undertaken with the in relation to the use of those areas, and Gill Reserve was designated as an area to play ball games, hence why there is no trees planted in the middle of it. It essentially turns into a dust bowl. Yep. I appreciate that I'm almost out of time. What I did want to draw Council's attention to, it's consistent with Council's plan for the public spaces strategy, blue-green, and prioritisation. We note that that Council has a commitment to good governance. What we are seeking is transparency and equity.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just because you're the only speaker, I thought it'd be good to hear you out. Thank you very much on that one. All right, I call upon Alex Darton speaking to item 11.1, the draft urban forest strategy for engagement.
Again, Councillors and Mayor, Elwood, Alex Darton. Firstly, very happy to have the urban forest strategy draft up, but I feel there are some holes in it, specifically around maintenance. The most common concern, this is in the draft, about urban green spaces was whether they would be properly maintained. No mention of the maintenance contract that I believe is citywide, mentioned earlier, is in the draft though. And if I remember correctly, there is a clause in that states you must follow Australian standards when practical when pruning street trees. That'd be a good start to remove from the contract if that's where you're headed. Also failed to mention the extremely large cars are now around my area, with sort of the size of Sherman tanks, that are routinely knocking down young trees around my streets. They're a big issue for the health of trees. I also reckon every single development down Rainsford Street, which is where I live on the corner, about 5 of them have knocked down or damaged the trees out the front of them. I don't know what the concessions are there or what damage you can get from them. But that's not really mentioned. Secondly, this was new to me, but I believe some of you are at the Urban Heat Island the PCAM put on, the forum. And within that, there was a guy there, Gio Fitzpatrick, who mentioned a thing called LERPs, which I hadn't heard of till then, which is produced by certain trees that we're going to be planting. This LERPs is a sugary substance that attracts minor birds, noisy minor birds. Nobody likes minor birds. They're little bullies from South Australia, and they are now, by the sounds of it, kicking out all the other native birds, small and large. So that's a big issue, I believe, that should be mentioned in there. Thirdly, I couldn't find any reference to significant tree registry, which I believe other councils do have. We don't, well, if we do have it, I couldn't see it in that. And fourthly, if my memory serves me correct, this time of year is roughly when we start planting a lot of the trees. I haven't seen any around, nor have I read of any being planted around, except for one on the foreshore. And lastly, I found it strange, but I assume this is to do with the upcoming precinct development plans, but that you grouped Balaclava and East St Kilda together. Yeah, just thought that was strange, and I look forward to the precinct plans.
Thank you, Alex. I call upon Jack Halliday, speaking to item 11.1, the draft urban forest strategy. Hello, Jack. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Jack Halliday from Balaclava. Madam Mayor, councillors and officers, the urban forest strategies involved extensive community engagement and the preparation of 3 consultants' reports, the public release of which we appreciate as they enable better understanding of the issues. However, it's disappointing that after all this work it's not been possible to set budgets and targets for the strategy. What we have is a partial strategy. The first 2 stages are complete, but the final and most important stage, policy development, is only now starting and will require extended time to be completed. So it's difficult to respond to. So 6 comments and questions. First, the draft budget allocations don't align with the proposed planting numbers, which increased to 1,500 tree plantings annually from year 2. Second, given time to canopy maturity for new plantings, front-end loading in the first 5 years is critical in reaching canopy targets. This issue is mentioned in the officer's report but not dealt with in the draft. A linear projection of 1,500 trees each year won't provide increased plantings in the early years. Third, the implementation schedule shows that precinct plans will require 3 years to complete. Can priority be given to those precincts with lowest canopy, the most significant heat issues, lack of open space and socio-economic disadvantage? Fourth, the maintenance contract is critical to the success of the strategy and there's awareness that it's not working as intended and it still has 2 years to run. It's not covered in the draft though. Can Council address the relevant contract issues from the outset? Fifth, the audit of tree conditions and gaps will be undertaken in year 1, but is also described as an annual process. Surely this should be business as usual. And last, the Hanson recommendations to reduce canopy loss on private property are not addressed anywhere. How can the Council be confident that the ESD amendments which are there will be adequate?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, I have online next Claire. Is Claire Kermond available? Claire, can you hear us?
Beg your pardon?
Hi,
yes,
Claire.
I can.
Yes, if
Thank
you could say your name and your suburb, you have 2 minutes to speak about 11.2, the Community Electric Vehicle Program, please.
Thank you. Claire Kermond of Albert Park. Thanks very much for the opportunity. So the reason I wanted to speak at the council meeting is I moved into the area just over 2 years ago with a small electric car, and at that time I approached the council to ask what was being done about more EV chargers because there are only 2 public chargers in the whole municipality. Since that time, nothing has changed or improved on that front, and I note from the council's report it's actually been 6 years that the council first said they would put more charges in, and in that time nothing has changed. I've also noted that I emailed 4 different councillors about this over the past 2 years and have had responses from none of them, including the mayor, unfortunately. I got a response yesterday from 1 councillor, which isn't a great track record for 2 years, I'm sure you'd agree. So my specific questions are, why are there only 2 public EV chargers in the South Melbourne car park, South Melbourne Market car park? It's a massive car park with the obviously the multi-level car park and the public one on the ground level. The council doesn't mention in its report talking to retailers such as Woolworths, Bunnings and ChargeFox, which is one of the largest EV charger suppliers and has its head office in Port Melbourne. You only mention in the report Ampol, which is bizarre because they don't have EV chargers in most of their petrol stations. BP is the one that does, and Coles, which doesn't have a lot of public land nearby. So I'm just wondering what's been done on that. And also, why does the council ban residents from charging their EV cars outside the front of their houses when you've made so little progress in getting public chargers going? There's a specific mention on the council's website that we're not allowed to put out an extension cord, even with safety signs or witches' hats or whatever, and charge our cars out the front of our houses. In the whole time I've been asking about this, the only change is that...
Claire, it has been 2 minutes, so I'll have to stop you there. Thank you. I'm sorry if we've missed those emails. On to Marissa Calippo in person. Marissa, you here? Speaking also to 11.2, Community Electric Vehicle Program. Hello, Marissa.
Hello, everybody. My name is Marissa.
Sorry, if you could wait till you're on the microphone, just because it's recorded. Thank you.
Marissa, I live in Balaclava, and I had the same problem as what the lady has just spoken about, EV chargers. I have emailed several times. I only got a response after I kept on ringing. Julian phoned me and he gave me some advice. But it's been years and years and years and there's just been no progress. I had a look at your flood map. Virtually all the areas in Port Phillip is flooded. Even St Kilda Town Hall is a flood zone, and yet you have 20 chargers here underground, which the water does go underground. And I've done a lot of research on this on the net in Europe and been to Europe, and I've seen their curbside charging and you can't even tell they're there. That's how safe they are. We have so many cracks on our footpaths. I don't see why they cannot put a little line in your footpath with this plastic wrap or whatever it is they've used. I have emailed Julian with photographs with it all, and it's a safe alternative. No one can trip on it. It's covered. It's even. And like the other lady, I don't see why you can't charge your car if you don't have car park or carports outside in your footpath, even with one of those ramps. You know, you could have like a designated time when you can do it, or maybe have a permit to do it. I think there's a lot of people that want to buy electric vehicles, but they won't because of that issue. And there's hardly none. There's one in Coles in St Kilda, and there's one in Woolies. And there's so many places around Balaclava where you can have one, and it's only a 30% chances of a flood zone. Like the city of St Kilda is the same thing as well, because I looked at your flood zone maps. I just think you're not working hard enough, and I don't think the council and the state government are working together in this.
Thank you, Marissa. I'll call upon Rod Walker, speaking to item 11.2, Community Electric Vehicle Program. Hello, Rod. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Rod Walker, Williamstown. I'm the inventor of curb charge. It's critical that we don't lose sight of the main objective here with electric vehicles, and that is the imperative to electrify our transport system. For each diesel petrol car we replace with an electric car, we save 2.6 tonne of CO2 annually. There are 2 issues holding up the process. The first is the price of electric vehicles. The second is the charging ability. We can do nothing about the price of cars, but councils are the critical element in the charging process. When considering curb charge, or indeed any charging model, council incur administrative costs. With respect to curb charge, the application revenue flowing to council for each application is $1,351, with a fee of $135 trailing revenue each year thereafter. Option 2, which supports curb charge, expects to employ a council officer for 2 days at $50,000 per annum. If we submitted just 1 application per week, the council would make a profit on your own numbers of $20,000. For every additional application, $1,350 flows to council along with the additional trailing income. As the trial has shown, once the one-off issues of insurance, floodplain, etc. were settled, the application process for the council was very quick, measured in hours. From the resident's perspective, driving 15,000 kilometres will cost a typical car user $2,500 in petrol. To travel the same 15,000 kilometres using a public charge system will cost the resident using the 11 kilowatt units, which are street placed, over $1,100 and take, importantly, 5 hours to fully charge. If they access the faster chargers, usually in hub locations, these are DC units, not on light poles, the cost will be closer to $1,500, but still take an hour waiting time, which is typically at night after work. However, by contrast, if the resident can charge at home off-peak between midnight and 6 when they're asleep by using the car's timer, the cost is just $197 for the same 15,000 kilometres. Home charging, when considering cost and convenience, home charging is obviously a better solution by every measure. The proper role of public charging is to fill the gap and needs to be supported. Councils should be doing everything they can to encourage home charging, as it lessens the demand load on public charging, saving infrastructure provision for councils and the community. Looks like I'm done, so I'll stop. I've got some more, but never mind.
We've got a question here from Councillor.
Thank you for your submissions, and thank you for the submissions through email. If I recall, Port Phillip was the first council to support your product being installed in the trial,
endlessly thankful for.
Which is good. Has the take-up been improved since the trial's been undertaken with neighbouring councils or other councils in Victoria?
Well, the other councils are all waiting on Port Phillip's decision. This is a very consequential meeting for us and for electric vehicle charging generally, because we are the only solution out there that answers the ladies' questions that have been coming before. The idea of putting tiny ribbons of cable in under footpaths will not pass Energy Safe Victoria standards, because the AS 3000 requirement is 500 mil underground. So if Port Phillip approve us and we get a chance to go more broadly in Port Phillip, it will open the door. New South Wales government changed their planning rules in order to encourage us to move up to New South Wales. They've got a different model. We don't have to apply to a council to have curb charge in. People can make an application and that council need to consider it then. But this is the beachhead. If we can get over the line here in Port Phillip, then this gives us a chance to move further forward. And that
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? So the trial's been going.
Yes.
And we've all been very supportive of that. What's been the blocker to get this into other councils? Because obviously this decision's been around for a few weeks. But over the trial period, why have more councils not looked at your product and said, we must have this in our council?
Because none of them will put the time in to get it to this point. They waited to see what Port Phillip would do and how it would work. I've been approached by many of the other councillors and spoken to many of the sustainability officers and a number of the councillors. They're all looking at this council to see how it goes. And frankly, this council had to put in a lot of energy and time to get it over the line, which I think was tremendously laudable, and I will always be grateful for it. But we need to push it over the line completely now. The trial, from our perspective, was massively successful. Everybody who has them in the ground loves them. You've had numerous emails and conversations with people who have spoken glowingly of it. We've got many other people who want to put this in the ground, and we can do it in Port Phillip, and we'll get it, if we get a chance to scale up, we will.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rod. I'm trying to read the handwriting. I'm not sure if it says Sarah Miller or Jack Miller. So, okay, sorry. I have bad handwriting, but yours is, I just couldn't read it. Sorry. Sarah, if you can come down. You're also speaking about 11.2, I believe, for the electric vehicle program.
That's correct.
Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Name Sarah Miller, live in Albert Park, and I have been told my handwriting looks like a doctor, which is not a compliment. I am here to support 11.2, particularly option 2. Last month I shared my own personal views as to why I was an interested customer, but I am here tonight to support 11.2 and particularly continuing the momentum and significant progress that's already been made in the last month around a change in direction for ongoing private charging with curb charge. The 2 call-outs that I wanted to say were indicative of significant progress were the assigned resourcing that I believe will allow more users to use it so that it's the lessons that have been learnt through the pilot can be done quicker, which was shown by the end of the pilot, but particularly some of the commercial elements around looking to scale the product so that the council can continue to lead and build momentum with other councils that can follow. So that's all I'm here to say tonight. A big thank you and commending one of our local residents for his innovative technology. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, next I have Janine Scherer joining us online. Do we have Janine? Speaking to item 13.2, this is the City of Port Phillip Strategic Membership Review 2024. Janine, can you hear us? Janine, if you can hear us, name, suburb, in 2 minutes, please.
There
you go. We can hear you now. Go ahead, Janine.
Hello. Thank you very much. My name is Janine Shearer. I'm the Director of Engagement for the Committee for Melbourne, and I'm here to talk about the value that the Committee for Melbourne provides to the City of Port Phillip. Committee for Melbourne is a unique membership organisation that has a cross-sectoral and diverse membership group. It includes universities, other councils, engineering firms, architectural firms, all sorts of organisations. Our unique voice is able to represent to government on city shaping initiatives, and government listen to us, particularly state government, because we represent the whole community, not just sectors. Our influence continues to rise at the moment, and this is evidenced by our recent events program, where in the last year we have had 10 Meet the Minister events. We've also had parliamentary drinks for our foundation members, a Treasurer's Lunch also for our foundation members, which I note that the City of Port Phillip CEO and Mayor, we were pleased to host them on the Treasurer's table. So we're able to represent City of Port Phillip's interests in ways that no one else can. For example, with our Fisherman's Bend submission that you requested that we write to government, because we knew you knew that we had a unique voice that was complementary to what you were doing. So the Committee for Melbourne provided an elevated view of what should be considered for the precinct, and including major transport and infrastructure development, to remind government to take a holistic view of this. Now, back to the events. We're very excited to be collaborating with the City of Port Phillip on an event next week on Fisherman's Bend. So this is not the first event we've had on this topic, but it's going to be, it's very well attended. We have been inundated with people wanting to join us, and we're actually at capacity at the moment.
Oh, that's so good to hear, Janine. I'm sorry to have to stop you there, but we're looking forward to that event next week. I have to keep to the 2 minutes. Thank you very much for joining us online tonight. I call upon Reese Thomas, speaking. He's in person. Reese, hello. Hello. Speaking to item 13.2, City of Port Phillip Strategic Membership Review 2024. Hello, Reese.
Thank you, Mayor. My name's Reese Thomas. I'm the Head of Local Government Programs and Policy at the Victorian Local Governance Association in Carlton. I'm here to speak in support of the officer's recommendation in the Strategic Memberships Review before you this evening. The officers summed up the relationship between the VLGA and the City of Port Phillip very well in the report, and highlighted, I think, some of the direct engagements we've had with councillors and senior staff over the past 12 months. But we've got big plans ahead. It's an election year, and governance has been front of mind for the entire sector. I've come along tonight. I'm very new to the VLGA. I've been there for under a month. I've largely come along just to introduce myself and say hello, and say that I'm looking forward very much to working with Port Phillip and other councils across Victoria over the coming 12 months. We've got some big plans ahead. We're in the process of undertaking candidate training right now. We're shortly to launch our Councillor Readiness Program, induction program offering for councils, and our ongoing professional development program for councillors to comply with the new requirements of the Local Government Act. And we've done this in an environment of increasing cost pressures on all of us, and I'm pleased to say that we've been able to keep the membership cost for the VLGA capped equivalent to the state government rate capping amount, notwithstanding the fact that our costs are increasing by more than that, but with a bit of efficiency savings, we've been managed to limit the increase to that amount. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Reese and the VLGA. I call upon Justin Halliday, speaking to item 14.1. This is a notice of motion by Councillor Louise Crawford on caravan parking. Hello, Justin.
Good evening, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor, councillors and council officers. My name is Justin Halliday. I live in St Kilda East. I'm here tonight in response to Councillor Crawford's motion directing our officers to investigate options to reduce the amenity impacts of long-term parking storage of caravans, trailers, boats on Alexandra Street in St Kilda East. This issue has been covered in a front-page article in the Sunday Age, segments on Channel 7 News, The Today Show and 774, as well as being subject to a proposal for us under the public space strategy 4 years ago, and recent emails to councillors in the context of the budget and the Inkerman Street decision. The issue is due to Port Phillip's decision 17 years ago to install over 56 parking spots alongside the cemetery wall on Alexandra Street. This is in addition to 24 parking spots on the east side of that street, for a total of 70 parking spaces on Alexandra Street. For almost 15 years, nobody has used these spots. They've just been sitting there. More recently, though, word has gotten around that this is a great place to store long-term storage of trailers, camper vans, caravans, storage trailers, dog washers, Uber hire trucks and commercial vehicles. Gradually, these dump vehicles have encroached on the entire street and have displaced the local residents and their visitors from the parking there. This has had significant impacts on local amenity and personal safety of the residents in this area. The suggested change to put in place 4-hour limits on the street will just move these vehicles in front of someone else's house, and that's not a great solution to this problem. I call on Council to use its power to apply parking restrictions to towed vehicles across all of Port Phillip, preventing further increase of dumped vehicles on our streets. I also call on Port Phillip to undertake a parking audit to identify exactly how many on-street parking spaces we need for the immediate community, and to earmark the excess space for conversion into a linear park alongside the cemetery. The conversion of this unnecessary parking into public space is a cost-effective way of addressing the lack of public open space in St Kilda East and will improve amenity. I note that these actions are in line with Council's consideration tonight of the discontinuance of Johnson Street.
Thank you, Justin. All right, thank you. And Michelle Mardestrix, are you here? Thank you. Michelle, I have you down for 14.1, the notice of motion for caravan parking as well. Is that correct? Yes.
Correct.
Hi, Michelle.
My name is Michelle Mardesh. Thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight. Without a doubt, the parking area in Alexandra Street is unsightly. But what is the actual issue here? Is it that residents who live in the local area don't like the look of the unsightly vehicles, which may have an impact on their the valuations of their homes, or are there more pressing issues? I'm of the opinion that it's the unsightliness which is the issue. Concerns have been raised in the media as addressed by Justin, that criminal behaviour, the dumping of rubbish and disturbances on the street are occurring as a result of that parking. I can tell you that the caravan owners and the van owners and the trailer owners aren't contributing to that. Those issues do exist, but it's as a result of residents dumping their rubbish on the street when they move out. There's some drug dealing happening on Alexandra Street, which causes disturbance in the street. And criminal activity is occurring in the area with criminal gangs coming in from other areas and stealing number plates and cars. It's not the recreational vehicles parked there that are causing the issue. We've been very fortunate in St Kilda East to not have restricted parking in the past. If we introduce a 4-hour parking limit, it is going to move the problem that's in Alexandra Street into other local streets. Residents will then complain again to Council, and Council will need to look at the issue yet again. I think what will happen is restricted parking will then be looked at for neighbouring streets, and eventually paid parking permits might be introduced by Council. Residents still won't be happy with that. So, by all means, Council, undertake an investigation, but can you please establish what the actual concern here that residents have raised with you? Is it that they're just not happy with the unsightliness of the area and the decreased or the impact on their property values, or are there other pressing issues that need to be...
Thank you, Michelle. Sorry, we did mess up the timer up here. I will admit to that. I'm sorry about that. But, Michelle, we have a clarifying question from Councillor Clark online. Rhonda?
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to ask the Speaker, do you currently park a boat, trailer or any of those other items on the street, or do you park your car on this street at all?
Yeah, so she's just asking you for a clarifying question.
Sorry, I was moving away and not realising you were talking to me.
Sorry, that's all right. So she's just asking if you currently have a vehicle, whether it's a boat, a caravan or anything, or a normal car, on this street?
No, I don't park any vehicle on Alexandra Street. I park my cars on my street. I do have some recreational vehicles, but I park them out of the area completely.
Thank you.
But what I can say is there are local residents that do park their vehicles there. So it's not only outside residents.
I'm going to call upon Tracy Harvey, speaking to item 14.2. This is the notice motion by Councillor Louise Crawford, but about Elster Creek litter.
Fantastic, thank you. The Elwood Canal Action Team would like to thank Port Phillip
Can
Council.
I pause you real quick?
Oh, yes.
Name, suburb in 2 minutes.
Elwood, thank you. Great to be here. My first meeting at the council, and it's a ripper. You're doing a great job. God, it's a long night. Well done to you all. Okay, Elwood Canal Action Team would like to thank Port Phillip Council for your collaboration with other councils and Melbourne Water to stop plastic litter from flowing into Port Phillip Bay. However, these efforts are not enough. Every day our team, Paul Cullity up the back, Julian Viola, collect 7 kilos of plastic litter from Elster Creek, and it's going into Port Phillip Bay. We've got underwater shots of plastic litter strewn across the seabed in front of Elwood Pier. Between New Street and Marine Parade on the canal, there's always litter to be found in the canal, especially after rain. In a meeting with Melbourne Water, we were told Mordialloc Creek's much worse. No. If we fix here, we'll have to fix everything. Okay. We estimate well over a tonne of plastic litter is going into Port Phillip Bay every year from Elwood Canal and the diversion drain. You all know it, opposite Elster Primary. It doesn't include that tonne, the plastic litter that would be flowing from Shakespeare Grove, the newly built pier there, and Cowderoy Street outlets. We have a petition with over 1,100 signatures. We've requested to present that to the Honourable Minister for Water, Harriet Shing. We've met with Josh Burns. He's advised us there's a $1.7 million federal grant allocated to address pollutants in Elster Creek. He reckons this is a good idea to use some of that to prevent plastic litter going into Port Phillip Bay. We've found a litter trap on a canal in Denmark called the Sea Protector 1. It's valued at around $600,000. It looks like it'd do the job really well. But Melbourne Water have checked it out. They've had correspondence, and they have stated in a document we've seen it's over-engineered for the Elwood Canal and too expensive. Thanks for your time. Here's some photos.
Thank you, Tracy.
Of the litter we've collected.
Yeah. Hey, thank you very much. If you want to give it to the governance team, yeah. Thank you very much for picking up that litter. It's great service.
The stingrays, the dolphins.
And they thank you too.
They need soil. So thank you.
Thank you. I call him. Yep. Good job. I call upon Gillian Sokol, speaking to item 14.2, the notice of motion about Elster Creek litter as well. Hi, Gillian. Name, suburb, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you. Jill Sokol, Elwood resident and member of Beach Patrol and Love Our Street. I've been picking up rubbish for years, and I talk a lot of rubbish as well. So we've got a number of groups active in the Elster Creek catchment. We have a Caulfield group in the city of Glen Ira. We've got our Elwood group, which is the Foundation Love Our Street group. We've got Balaclava Ripponlea. We have Elstonwick Park, Yallockit Willem in the city of Bayside, and we have Beach Patrol in Elwood. Our volunteers recognise the problem that litter causes for our creatures on land and in waterways, and councillors who come along to our cleanups would know this too, that litter is an issue. We try and stop it getting to the waterways in the bay. The beach activity is our last gasp attempt. You know, most of the litter ends up in the bay. I've tabled with council a number of graphs that I would ask you to refer to in a document. On our first page, you will see that the Elster Creek catchment groups have collected over 6 tonnes of rubbish in the years that our reports have been active, and our beach groups have collected over 3 tonnes. On page 3 of that document, you'll see a graph from the Yallockit Willem, and that 5 months of action in 2024 has already collected over nearly half a tonne. That's mainly an Elwood resident taking action to protect Elwood Beach from the rubbish that flows down the canal. If you look at the data on the last page, that's the kinds of items that flow down the bay. So these things end up in the bay. We need to take action. City of Port Phillip needs to take the lead to protect our ratepayers and our environment from the costs of this damage.
Thank you, Gill.
Thank you.
I call upon Isaac Herman, speaking also to 14.2, the notice of motion for Elster Creek litter. Hello again, Isaac.
Good evening once more.
You have to do name suburb again because they're for
Isaac
the record.
Herman from Elwood.
Thank you.
Very welcome notice of motion from Councillor Crawford. We need to note, though, I think, the basis for community concerns, and so I'd like to suggest this addition. The Council acknowledges the urgency in addressing stormwater-delivered microplastic pollution that is threatening our unique and critically endangered Baranam bottlenose dolphins in Port Phillip Bay as researched by the Marine and Mammal Foundation, Melbourne University and RMIT, as well as the recent year's five-fold increase in documented EPA poor bay reports. I think it's really important to add this to the five points that are already noted. I'd just like to mention in the supporting documentation, I think there's a number of corrections that should be made, just for the record. For a start, according to Melbourne Water, the only correct name for this drain and for the proposed project is the Elwood Main Drain Duplication. Melbourne Water refuses to recognise any other name. Just to note, the project is not under construction as yet. It has not been approved by a decision by this council. Melbourne Water has not provided an environmental effects statement. Melbourne Water has not received permits from Port Phillip or Bayside councils. Melbourne Water has not received the Minister for Environment's approval. They all refer to item 4, advocacy, and now for item 5, long-term litter management, where it's stated there are several other stormwater outlets to the bay. Well, in fact, directly to the bay or via the Yarra, the City of Port Phillip has 92 outfalls to the bay in addition to Melbourne Water drains. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. One more. I call upon Paul Cudley, speaking to item 14.2 as well. This is Elster Creek litter. Hello, Paul. You are the lucky last, as far as I know. Anybody else who thinks they've signed up tonight? Can you see the governance team? Otherwise, Paul, finish us off.
Hi, Paul Cullity, Elwood resident. I'd just like to thank Louise Crawford for bringing the motion forward. The huge amount of litter that going down the Elwood Canal and Elster Creek is just staggering. And an amendment, if could be made, would be with the collaboration between Melbourne Water, City of Glenara, Bayside, that there's community involvement in that somebody from the community sits in on those meetings or is asked to join those meetings. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. All right. I usually take a break about 8, so everyone's good to keep going? Okay. All right. Now we'll go back to Councillor question time. These are questions from the councillors of general nature, not related to any items on the agenda tonight. I'm going to go first. Sorry, jump in there. My question is that community members have raised concern over the removal of 4 palm trees and gasworks to make way for more shade trees. Can council provide an update on the future of these palm trees, noting relocation is being considered? I think that's maybe Dana.
Through you, Mayor, we've re-looked at the design for Gasworks Arts Park and will now be relocating the 2 large palm trees to frame the new Angel stage, and the 2 smaller palms will be relocated to a project in St Kilda.
Oh, excellent. What? I've been told outside the Prince of Wales and Ackland Street. Okay. Councillor Niagri's next on my list. Councillor?
Well, Alex stole my question, but I guess my follow-up question would be in relation to the consultation on minimum standards for rental properties and rooming houses, whether there'd be an opportunity for councillors to provide feedback before that submission was put forward, and whether there'd be time for that to come to a council meeting, noting it's obviously due in a month.
Lauren?
Through you, Mayor, I would have to check on timings regarding coming to a council meeting, but we can certainly ensure that we're sharing our proposed response with councillors and seeking any feedback.
Excellent. Councillor Pearl, I see you have 3.
Thanks very much. 3 quick questions tonight, if possible. Could officers please provide a detailed update on the actions from the Council Report 10.3 on the 6th of December 2023, specifically relating to the budget allocation needed to complete the works in Queens Lane? I'm talking about here at the end of Queens Lane with Kingsway, and any reason for the delay in installation and signage along Queens Lane, please. So there was, in that report, there was a significant improvement work at the end of the street, and there was a number of other initiatives, including improving the signage in the street.
Fiona?
Great, thank you for that question. Through you, Mayor, I can advise that the budget allocation for the line marking works at the intersection of Kingsway and Queens Lane is $80,000. The budget allocation for the intersection upgrades at the intersection of Queens Lane, Arthur Street, and Queens Lane, Leopold Street is in the order of $610,000 combined, and these costs include contingency. And a review of the 40 kilometre per hour signage was completed. Works orders were subsequently sent, and the signs were installed in April 2024. So that's pretty typical time frame for those types of works. Thank you.
Thanks. The first part of the question was, can we get a detailed update on the actions in that report? I appreciate the budget allocations, but the actual, what are we actually doing to implement the report 10.3 on the December 6th?
In relation to those, we've got the budget allocation to undertake those works, but I'll come back to you and take that on notice for the further detailed.
Thank you. Next question.
What plans are in place to ensure the condition of traffic management activities in and around Queens Lane, considering the high volume of new construction projects in the area? What information is Council able to provide the residents regarding traffic movements in and out of the construction sites, and how is Council coordinating the very large number of construction sites accessing Queens Lane?
Thank you for that question. All traffic management plans for construction sites are reviewed by Council's Transport Safety Team, and Council's Development Permitting Team work with Council's traffic engineers and directly with developers to ensure conflicting sites are coordinated to minimise any disruption on affected residents and businesses. In relation to the information that we are currently providing the residents, I'll have to take that on notice.
Thanks very much. And the final question is, could officers please provide an update on the reinstatement of the Captain Cook statue in St Kilda?
Councillor Lauren, please.
Through you, Mayor, since our last update to councillors in early May, officers have confirmed permit details and timelines with Heritage Victoria, finalised all costs relating to damage and reinstatement and submitted an insurance claim to recoup those costs, met with the state government through Local Government Victoria to advise on process and timeline and seek state government support for additional elements for the site, including interpretive panels and traditional owner engagement, contacted both traditional owner groups with an interest in the site, the Bunurong Land Council Aboriginal Corporation and the Bunurong Land and Sea Council, to understand their interest and ability to work with council on elements of the site, including the interpretive panels.
Just to follow up, when is the statue going back up?
Through you, Mayor, we are still aiming for a date no later than October.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. There's been considerable angst in the community about the impending closure of the Shakespeare Grove Post Office, and I know the members of the Older Person Advisory Committee are very concerned. I'm also aware that this is not really an issue that Council has a whole lot to do with. Are officers or the Mayor able to let us know, has Council been able to offer any advocacy, or if not, is Council able to take any action at all that may have some influence on the impending closure of this post office?
Who's taking it? Lauren?
Through you, Mayor, I can start and others may wish to add. We have, James is just popping down, so I will say we have connected Ackland Court with the owners of Australia Post. They were willing to offer a free site for Australia Post to relocate to. We did do that. I might hand over to James.
Hello, James. Is the red light on?
Here we go. Through you, Mayor, and thank you very much for the question, Councillor Martin. We've worked closely with Josh Burns' office to raise their awareness of the issue. We have written formally to the Federal Minister for Communications on this issue, requesting their support to a resolution. We have also written directly to the Head of Governance at Australia Post to request a resolution. We have raised the issue through Josh Burns' office and connected them to Ackland Court, who have made an offer of an alternative location as well. We met most recently with Josh Burns on Friday regarding the issue as well, who's sharing the petition, which is a community petition at this point in time. At the moment, the issue still remains unresolved with no definitive outcome.
Thank you, James. All right, any further questions from councillors of general nature? Anybody online? No? All right, we'll move on then to the sealing schedule. Councillors, we have no items for sealing on tonight's agenda. So on to petitions and joint letters. Councillors, we have the one petition tonight. That's the 7.1 petition for submission for irrigation in Gill Reserve. Do councillors have any questions of the officers in relation to the item? Councillor Crawford?
I guess I'd be interested. We don't irrigate all of our parks, so I guess I'm interested in why we did or didn't choose to irrigate this one, just out of interest ahead of the report coming back.
Lachlan Johnson?
Through you, Mayor, no. Councillor Crawford, we don't irrigate all of our parks. We do irrigate some. So in some areas where there's high utilisation or in some other areas where that boundary layer of the dirt and the vegetation on top provides protection from contamination, we do irrigate. There was some history that was talked about with regards to the management of Gill Reserve, which we will go away and we will consider in considering the response to the petition about whether irrigation is suitable in this particular reserve.
Thank you. Councillor Nagui?
I note that Council's in the process of undertaking an irrigation strategy. I'm just wondering what the sequence in terms of the response to this would be, whether that strategy would be complete before we make this decision as a report back, or whether that would happen after.
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Nyagui, I'll have to take that on notice, but we'll give some consideration to the broader irrigation strategy when we do come back with a response to the petition.
Thank you. Any further questions? If not, councillors, we have the officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Councillor Martin to move. Councillor Crawford to second. Thank you. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
I should thank the petitioners for submitting the petition, and I look forward to the officer's report and their recommendations.
Right. Councillor Crawford? No? Anybody else speaking to the item? All right. If not, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right. Now we're on to presentation of reports. The first one we have is 8.1, the presentation of the CEO report, issue 107 for April 2024. Are there any questions of the officers in relation to the report? No. Who would like to move this? Councillor Martin and Councillor Crawford to second. Thank you. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
As I've mentioned many times, there's always a mine of useful information in the CEO's report. Can I highlight two things that have really jumped out to me? First, the increase in our open space areas. In the last few months, we've purchased 2 properties abutting Packington Reserve, a property abutting Jim Duggan Reserve, 2 properties in Lansdowne Street, those 3 properties are all in St Kilda and St Kilda East, and a property in Williamstown Road, Fisherman's Bend. So it's fantastic to see our open space being reserved, our open space reserve being committed to provide new open space in Port Phillip, and I'm sure particularly the people in Balaclava and St Kilda East will be delighted with that information. The other thing that I see, there's a whole page talking about some amazing work that SECA has been doing, and it talks about SECA's Enhancing Climate Resilience Project and the Community Resilience Toolkit, which SECA has developed in support with our council and the Minderoo Foundation. And I know that all of the local councils, including the City of Port Phillip, have been using that. And I'm also delighted to report that the Minderoo Foundation, as recently of yesterday, are looking to work with SECA and the Disaster Relief Australia organisation to further enhance the application of that Community Resilience Project Toolkit. The other thing I note is that there's also a net zero emissions roadmap that's been produced by SECA, and again, really useful tools for our council officers. So always fantastic information. So hope that we all receive this report enthusiastically.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crawford.
I'm just going to highlight a couple of things. We haven't done this for a while. I do want to reiterate and thank the officers for delivering on the open space plan and inquiring all these properties. I think it's even less than a year, and there's still some to come. And obviously that will add to the equity of open space across our municipality. There are two other cool things happening in our municipality. It's not all bad news, and one of them is that the South Melbourne market is combining with the Port Phillip community group next door around food security and getting food at the end of the day so they can distribute to those people in need in our community, which I think is very exciting. And also the St Kilda Film Festival starts tomorrow night, and there's some really fantastic sessions happening at the Alex Theatre. Just putting that on your radar. So there are good news stories, not always just the getting things wrong.
Excellent.
So I commend this report.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to it? If not, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Sorry, people online, if you could just hold your hands closer to your face, then I can actually see them. Thank you. Perfect. Yep, there we go. All right, unanimous. Thank you. We're on to 9.1, State of Children's Services, third annual report. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officer in relation to the item? Councillor Pearl?
Just on page 52 or 54, I think it was, where it referred, 51, where it recurs as St Kilda Mums. I'm just wondering how much of St Kilda Mums operations is still in the city of Port Phillip, given that they've recently moved. It relies quite heavily, the report.
Thank you for the question. I can take that on notice, but I know our MCH team are still working with them and they still do provide, but I can't provide you a percentage at this point in time.
Thanks, Felicity. Oh, Councillor.
And what do we, once this report's approved and done, let's draft basically, but what do we do with this report once it's finally approved? So it goes through the process. What do we do with this document, and how do we ensure it becomes a living document as opposed to a gathering dust document, particularly with our childcare centres who are at the coalface of these services?
Felicity?
Thank you for that question. It's used internally for our own planning purposes, but we also share it with all our stakeholders, in particular our community managed childcare network, and we use that to help inform services around the context in which they're working with. We also use that obviously with all our staff to help inform their planning.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, if not, I'm looking for a councillor to move this or something else. Councillor Martin to move this. And Councillor Crawford, on a roll, you two. Councillor Martin?
Given that I'm on the board of one of the local community-operated childcare centres, I think it's only fitting that I move this. There's a wealth of information in this document. I know the childcare centre board that I'm on will be looking forward to receiving it and acting on the information there. We're doing great things with our childcare. There's one yellow flag, and that is that some of our council childcare centres are not currently at 100% capacity, and I look forward to council officers working with those centres to improve the take-up. But other than that, lots and lots of good news, and I thank the officers for preparing this detailed report.
I do think the state. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Crawford.
I do think the current the state of our children's services is quite impressive. We heard from our community over the last 8 years how important these services are, and the amount that we invest. I think that's probably an answer, Councillor Pearl, to how we make this living document, is we can keep putting our money where our mouth is around what we say is important to us, from everything from our toy libraries to our early intervention officers, I'm not sure the exact, and supporting families in need. Particularly, it's interesting to see that refugee families who are not eligible for any other funding are really utilising our services. So we know how much it's supported, and obviously the bigger picture is the upgrades to all the various facilities. So again, a lot of good things happening in this municipality.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? Councillor Nyagri?
I think this is a really good document. There are definitely challenges, and I guess I'd just highlight to the community, I think it's really important that they continue to highlight to us why they find these services so important. Councillors continue to debate whether we should remain in these services, and I think the answer is unequivocally yes. I think it's really important that we continue to engage with these reports and engage with how we can maintain these services for everyone in our community going forward.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Pearl?
An interesting report, and something with two very young children, I read closely. It does show the perils of council predicting demographics and just how difficult this game is. If you'd said to me 7 years ago our population would be lower in the city of Port Phillip, particularly for young people, than it is today, I would have laughed you out the door. But the reality is the demographics of our city in post-COVID and based on economic situation is very, very different to what we predicted 10 years ago and will likely be very different 10 years from now. And in fact, in this, 2 kilometres from this building, we've seen childcare centres close down on the basics of economics in the past 6 months, which was unthinkable, particularly 10 years ago. I know Councillor Martin was heavily involved in advocating for increased childcare centres because that was an unthinkable type of scenario then. So there's difficulty with planning with this, but plan we must. Don't recall anyone on this council supporting council exiting council-run childcare services in my time on council. We've certainly reviewed it, as we should, given just how difficult this market can be and just how it changes substantially over time. But you are right, we can't do this by ourselves. And core to this is a substantial funding commitment from the Victorian State Government, which we welcome, but we're still yet to hear anything from the federal government and the federal local member who provided very clear indications that federal funding would be provided to support us in making sure that we and our community deliver the highest possible services for childcare, because we can't do it by ourselves, because ultimately this is very clearly a state government responsibility and we don't have the resources, the time or the remit, to be frank, to do this by ourselves. So hopefully this time next year, or when the next report is produced in some years' time, we have a flourishing childcare centre which has also been built a strong foundation by support from the federal government. I think there's some errors in the report. One thing I looked at was the range of money back to the community at only $1.50 to $3 per dollar invested. I actually suspect that is substantially high. I have no evidence that that's an error, but any form of early intervention in our community, particularly with young disadvantaged people, with learning disabilities, educational disabilities, substantial disadvantage in their economic circumstances at home, saves the taxpayers enormous amounts of money as the decades go by, as many countries like Singapore and New Zealand, even the UK, have been able to evidence and demonstrate. So $1 spent in this part of our society, this part of our economy, saves the government money and increases the pie of the total economy as that person goes through their working life and also participating in our community. So we should not underestimate the return on investment that this sector makes to our economy. And our council does a lot more than neighbouring councils in this sector. But again, we cannot do it alone. We need the federal government and our local federal member to step up to the plate and start giving us some money so we can improve these services.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? Councillor Martin, do you want to close it all? No? All right, let's go to the vote on that. All those in favour of the report? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right, on to 9.2. This is a Fair Access and Sport Policy and Action Plan. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to the report? Councillor Bond?
I was a little bit concerned to see that only 17 people responded to the consultation, which on face value seemed quite low given the number of members of our local sporting clubs we have. There would be tens of thousands of people in our local sporting clubs who are members of those clubs and participants in those clubs, yet only 17 people responded to this consultation or provided us feedback on this particular policy. Is there a reason why responses were so low?
Through you, Mayor, we did go out to all of our sports clubs. We went out to them on a number of different occasions. On this occasion, we only got 17. Some of those 17 are a representative from the club. So it might be that
because they're representing the club, they're speaking on behalf of all their members. But all clubs had an opportunity to comment. Obviously, a lot didn't take it up.
Thank you. Any further questions on the item? No.
Do we have any feedback why? I'm just surprised because particularly increased changing rooms, all that sort of stuff, I thought these clubs would be all over.
Through you, Mayor, we didn't ask why they didn't participate. We can go back and do that if that's something councillors would like.
All right, Joe, additional answer here. Joe?
Through you, Mayor, just to add to that response, the key thing that we aim for in engagement is to provide the opportunity to provide a response, and that is a key measure of success. The distribution, the opportunity that's provided, it's often unknown why people don't respond, but it can be an indicator that there isn't any concern with what's being proposed.
Excellent, thank you. Not a very controversial one, I guess. Any other questions? If not, I'm looking for someone to move this or something else. So Councillor Martin, Councillor Bond a second. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
In speaking to this, can I pick up on a couple of the questions from some of the other councillors? I'm involved in one of our local sporting clubs and we delegated the task of responding this to one of the committee members, not me for obvious reasons, so that there's a sporting club with 300 families with one person responding on behalf of the club. The other thing that I noted, and we had one of our speakers earlier tonight commenting that he felt council could have done a better job with a couple of pavilions like the Peanut Farm and Murphy Reserve. He may have been right in that regard, but I can assure you that as a regular user of those pavilions, they're certainly very equitable in that they allow access to everyone, and we've been very good at the sporting facilities we've put together in the last few years. So as a council, that would be another reason why people didn't have a whole lot to say, because they're quite comfortable with what our council's been doing in this area. And the one area that we're really... well, the major area that I see that went behind the 8 ball at the moment is the Waddy Watson Pavilion, and we're only a couple of months away from rectifying the issues there. So, excellent report, I commend it to you, and I think one of the reasons that we haven't copped a lot of flack from our community is that in the last few years our council's been pretty good in this space, but I'm sure we can always do better.
Councillor Bond?
One of the areas that's just exploded probably in the last 5 or 10 years has been female participation in sport, and it's fair to say that nearly every council in the state has been caught out with the growth in female sport and having to either rebuild or retrofit sporting facilities in our municipality, and I know in nearly every other municipality in the state, to ensure that those facilities are compliant for female sporting participants. What this policy does is ensure that when those females do participate in a club and join the club and start and play their organised sport, that they do have equality in access to these facilities. I know there are many clubs out there where the men have trained Tuesday, Thursday and played Saturday afternoon for 100 years in some instances, in some of the clubs that are 150 years, because we went to Port Melbourne Footy Club on Sunday for their 150th anniversary. So we've got these sporting clubs that are up to 150 years old in our municipality. But things are going to change at a lot of these clubs whereby there is a state government requirement us to ensure that all the facilities that we build for organised sport and participatory sport in our municipality, that both male and female have equal access to all those facilities, which includes pavilions, which includes change rooms, which includes training times, it includes playing times, it includes ovals, the days where there will be references in our city to the men's oval and the women's oval are long gone. We need to ensure that everyone has equal access to these ovals, and I think we've done a reasonable job as a city in investing in this area. People often say, well, my kids don't play sport. And I got an email today from someone, my kids don't play sport, so you shouldn't be investing in that area my money. Over the last 5 or 10 years, we've rebuilt Peanut Farm to ensure it's compliant. We've rebuilt Murphy's to ensure it's compliant. We're looking at doing something down at Waddy Watson. It's probably next on the list. We've built change rooms at Elmer Park over the years. We're about to start construction on change rooms and a pavilion at Lagoon Reserve. And probably our biggest investment would be the $38 million into a parcel of land on Williamstown Road in Port Melbourne to create more open space and more sporting facilities in that particular area. And when we get to construction of that, well, I'm sure we'll ensure that men and women and both groups in our community have equal access to those facilities. So we will be complying with this state government policy, I think, by very, very shortly. And it will include some change for some of the clubs who have always done things a certain way for 150 years. Well, they're just going to have to do things a little bit different as their club changes when they get increased female participation within their clubs. I know my old football club in Williamstown, when I played there were 2 teams, a seniors and a reserves. They've now got, I think, 4 or 5 male teams, and they had a female team about 3 years ago, and this year for the first time they've got a seniors and reserves in their female team. So they've got the number of men that were playing there when I was playing there about 30 years ago, they now have that many women playing at that particular club. So none of these increase in activity was foreseen 10 or 15 years ago, but it's happened, and we as councillors need to respond as best we can to them and ensure that these females are welcome in these clubs and in these change rooms, that we have the facilities available for them, and that they're not just pushed over into corners. They do get to train on the main grounds and play on the main grounds and use the main club rooms and get the main playing times and all that access that you would expect from clubs, and this policy will ensure that we do that as a council.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to the policy? Councillor Niagui?
I think this is a fantastic document, and I must continually applaud the state government for their landmark Gender Equality Act in 2020, which is the result, the reason that we're going through this process, and it's mandated now, and it's mandated across the entire state. I think there's a lot of work that's going to then be done. Obviously, we've got a lot of clubs that will now need to go out and deliver their own gender equality action plans, but I think having an approach that has every level of government and every level of the community engaging in these processes and finding ways to make sure that we have adequate and appropriate inclusion of not just women but of people of all genders and backgrounds, I think is critical. I think the days of having the men having the best times of the week and the best parts of the club are long, long gone. But this policy will continue to make sure that those kind of culture changes are embedded. I think it's been fantastic, certainly in my time in council, to see the ways in which a number of our sporting clubs are showing the way, and I'm sure that with the implementation of this policy we'll continue to move forward in this area. And I think, hopefully, I always think like one of the ways I use as a barometer to see how well a particular sport is going in this regard is your inability to ultimately not specify what gender you're talking about. I find that's often the case with tennis. When we talk about tennis, people will immediately ask you, you're talking about the men's or women's tennis, because both are so well regarded, they are so well in the spotlight and included in the community. That's not the case with every sport, but it is slowly changing, and more I find when we have conversations about sport, we've seen it with soccer this year, which has been absolutely incredible, and I hope it will continue to happen, and I'm really excited to see how it will roll out in our local clubs.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item tonight? Councillor Pearl?
Thanks very much. As Councillor Bond talked about before, women's sport in our city has got a fairly raw deal over the decades, and we've gone a long way to improve that, but there's still a very long way to go. But one thing this report doesn't necessarily go through is one of the key achievements, I think, of this council is to increase the capacity of the grounds that we currently have through lighting, improvements, which we've had a substantial help from the state government on in terms of money, but also the technology now to improve the capacity of the grounds means that we now have some ability to meet the demands of the increased demand, particularly from women's sport, but sport in general. Now, religion's a bit out of fashion. The new religion now is very much sporting clubs in terms of the way people attend their local communities. People used to go to church on Sundays. They now go watch their kids be umpired by Councillor Martin down at Murphy's Reserve on the weekend. Participation in local sport is enormous at the moment. We are heavily constrained with the amount of grounds we have, so it's critically important that we look after the ones we have. And a lot of improvement has been done by particularly Councillor Martin and Councillor Bond to ensure that takes place under this council. So investment is important in facilities and the grounds themselves, but the maintenance of those facilities also determines that our fair share obligations are also met. But women's sport has got a raw deal in terms of those are the traditional, more female sports and male sports in our city. And the key component of that is, of course, the Fisherman's Bend Gymnastics Club, who has hundreds of local members, particularly in Port and South Melbourne, and they desperately need a facility. So, albeit we have lots of new sports coming in with better representation, such as pickleball, etc., there's traditional sports that still get a very raw deal in the city of Port Phillip that we have an obligation to help because they help our community. And for the same reasons I spoke about before, sport is a key factor in the health of our community. For those that participate in it directly and those that volunteer in those organisations or even just watch the sport. It's a hugely beneficial thing. It's a hugely beneficial investment for our community and it's something that is core business for this council. And Fisherman's Bend Gymnastics Club desperately needs our help. I was very happy to read in the CEO report that help is moving forward, but it can't come fast enough. Happy to move this report here today.
We already have movers and seconders, by the way. Councillor Sirikoff.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think this is a really good way forward with this report. I'd say that the wealth to health, both mentally and physically, is through sports. We used to do it on the dance floor back in the 80s, but now we're doing it on the sports fields, and that can be whether on an oval or in a swimming pool, on a tennis court, or anything of that nature where we give equal opportunity to girls and boys and men and women. So by bringing more opportunity to girls and women to be out there in the sports ovals or in swimming pools or anywhere across the city of Port Phillip where we can create more sporting activities, I think it's a great outcome. And that social meeting more people, especially after COVID. I think this is a great forward. So I'm only too happy to support this report.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to it? Otherwise, we'll go to the vote. All right. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you very much. All right. Now, councillors, just looking if people want to break now, we might go one more. One more? Break? One more. All right. Okay, we're going to 11.1, the draft urban forest strategy for engagement. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to the report? Councillor Martin?
Can I just pick up on a couple of questions that one of the public speakers raised? It's good that Mr Halliday is here because I don't often have people my own age to work with. So he's actually emailed a copy of the questions out. I won't ask all of them, but very briefly, his first question to council was he was concerned that there were no budget numbers to line up with planting numbers in the draft document. And is this something that can be made available to people when and if they wish to comment as part of the consultation process? The second point he made is he's suggesting that if, given the time it takes for new plantings to come to maturity, have we got the targets right? Should we be looking at planting more trees earlier, given they're going to take a long time to get to maturity?
Councillor Martin, can you just pause between questions so we can get the answer, please?
Okay.
Through you, Mayor, with regards to the tree budget, there is budget within the parks budget, the annual infill budget. There's also money in the Greening Port Phillip budget, and there's money across a number of capital projects, and that pretty much covers everything. We can break that down further, but what you'll find is a lot of the budget for trees, what we're proposing through the urban forest strategy is one of the actions is that all our capital budgets for outdoors will also now include greening budgets within them.
Thank you. CEO?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Jack, for your question, and through you, Councillor Martin. It has been something very important to me to make sure that we do match up the targets with budgets. I do note that wasn't included in the officer's cover report, but we certainly have that information and we'll be able to provide that to you to demonstrate that across all the budgets in council, not just the Greening Port Phillip budget itself, there is significant allocation, and if we need to do more and come back to council, we can come back to council around that in due course.
Next question.
The second question that Mr Halliday raised is, given that it takes a considerable time for young trees to grow to full maturity, and given that we're looking at targets in terms of reaching our canopy cover, should we consider, if you like, front loading our tree planting, so increasing the number of tree plantings early in the plan, so that they can get to full maturity relatively early? So rather than plant the same number of trees every year, should we front load? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm putting this through on from Mr. Halliday's behalf. And is this something officers could take on board?
Dana?
Through you, Mayor, Jen Witheridge is online, and she can answer this question.
Jen, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we do want to front load planning as much as possible, and what we are looking at is how we can get the most trees in the ground as soon as we possibly can. Through you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. The question.
And the third question that I'll ask, and I'll leave it at that, is it really follows on from that. When we're looking at where we're going to be doing these initial plantings, Mr. Halliday wants to know, will we be giving priority to those precincts that have the lowest canopy, that perhaps have the most significant heat issues, lack of ocean space, and perhaps the highest socio-economic disadvantage?
Through you, Mayor, yes, that's definitely how we're going to prioritise.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter has a question online.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, my question is around the first year targets. Can officers just explain the situation around how we are setting targets for the first year and how those targets will evolve going forward in this draft strategy?
Dana, is that you?
Through you, Mayor, Jen Witheridge.
Jen, can you answer
Hi.
again? Thanks.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yes, what we're looking at doing is this year we've gathered a lot of data. So at the moment we have all of our heat vulnerability data. We know where our canopy is low. We also know where we're lacking shade on footpaths, bus stops, all of the areas where we know where people walk and travel. And so what we're doing as we develop the urban forest precinct plans as one of our actions is to do that analysis of where we need trees planted most that will give us the most impact on canopy. Through that analysis, we're also able to do the work to predict canopy cover going forward.
Thank you. Is that all, Councillor Baxter? Yep. Okay, Councillor Pearl.
Thanks very much. My question's in relation to the electrical line clearance. Two questions. Has there ever been a fire that started in the city of Port? Well, in recent time, has there been a fire that started because of our trees and power line connection in the past, say, 2 or 3 years?
Lachlan.
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Pearl, not that I'm aware of, but I can't say definitively.
So, as a follow-up question, I understand that the requirements in this policy and that we're following from the state government came from the Bushfire Royal Commission some time ago, and they require much higher setbacks than were in place previously. Does Council have a view, and it's okay if you don't have a view, but does Council have a view about whether or not those guidelines are fit for purpose in terms of, I presume our bushfire risk is quite low compared to regional and rural councils rather. Is there a recommendation that officers would make or could make in the future about what they think the distance of clearance between power lines and our trees should be?
Through you, Mayor, Council obviously complies with all regulations as is set at the moment. I do note that the electrical line clearance regulations are coming up for review, and Council will most certainly look to make a submission on what we think could be amended in the regulations to suit our specific environment. As you point out, we're obviously not a high bushfire risk area. We have significant targets we've been speaking about when it comes to trying to improve tree canopy across our city, and sometimes compliance with the regulations and those objectives can put things into contradiction with each other. So we'll consider that as part of a submission later on when that process opens up.
See you.
Through you, Mayor, I think the regulations have been in place for a while now, and I think we'd taken a I don't know if it was purposeful, but it happened. We've taken a lighter touch approach to compliance over many years. Energy Safe Victoria in the past 3 years has come down pretty hard on local governments, and Port Phillip being one of those, including writing to me and putting me and the council on notice around our level of compliance. We have had to divert a significant amount of resourcing and effort with our contractors onto pruning and in some cases removing canopy trees because of that regulatory burden. My view is that it would be good for us, and we've got an action in here about and we're continuing to advocate for a sensible mix around what is right for urban environment from a safety perspective, which we're very committed to. But whether the current regulations get the right mix, we're taking away canopy cover, we're removing trees. It's costing us a lot of money, and it means we're not spending that money on other things and amenity in the tree space, like when people ask us now for requests around pruning their street trees for amenity reasons. That's not getting very high priority, and the service levels are really dropping off because we have to spend all our effort on pruning for electrical line clearance, and we're spending at least $450,000 a year in this proposal on looking at what we're calling tree canopy protection, which is basically looking at engineered solutions for how, rather than chopping trees down or severe pruning, how we might use things like bundling and to protect those trees as much as we can, but that's not always a viable outcome.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl?
You read my question coming. So bundling, how does bundling work, and how much does it cost?
Lachlan?
Through you, Mayor. So aerial bundling of cabling is where, instead of having single strands of wire, you insulate the wires, you wrap them up together, you bundle them together, so they, in essence, under the regulations, they can have closer, trees can be trees, whether it's limbs or leaves can be closer to those trees. It can be expensive in some areas, so it's obviously dependent upon the span. In some instances in the last couple of years, we've spent $80,000 on aerial bundling of cabling in one single instance. I can't remember how long the span was, but it's cheaper than undergrounding, obviously. It's cheaper than diverting the power lines to the other side of the street. So it's a way to be able to ensure the power lines follow the normal course of where they are, but you can get better or closer proximity to existing trees and cater for tree growth.
Thank you. Councillor Sierrakoff, did you have a question? Yep.
I just want to raise a couple of correct questions in relation to a speaker tonight with concerns about the number of trees that are being planted in the city of Port Phillip. So in the urban forest strategy, it says that council will be planting some 1,500 trees annually. When will this start?
Through you, Mayor, it will start immediately next financial year.
And second question is, how many trees are currently being planted over the winter months and also annually?
Through you, Mayor, we've identified around 800 sites which are being planted as we speak, right across the municipality. We're also looking... Sorry, I can't read my notes. We're also working on capturing all the vacant sites across the municipality, and that will be happening in the next few months as well. This will provide more tree planting opportunities, and this is on top of any tree replacements and removals or trees planted through capital works projects.
Thank you. Any further questions tonight? If not, I'm looking for someone to move this or something else. Okay, Councillor Martin, Councillor Niagri to second. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to it?
Firstly, thank you to the officers involved in preparing the report, and I mentioned when the initial version of this came through, that St Jack report that's part of the council papers is one of the best reads that I've had since my time on council. There's lots of very, very useful and interesting information in the document. When I was looking at the document, the one thing I suppose concerned me is the targets aren't there yet, and I'm assuming that's going to come out of the consultation process. And I'm pleased that we've had a couple of questions from the public earlier, and thank you to the office for answering them. So I'm more comfortable now than I was when I first read through the document, because there were lots of wonderful statements there, but the points of clarification have made me even more confident that we're going to end up with a very, very green Port Phillip, and I hope that well within my lifetime I'll be able to walk down the streets and we'll find that there'll be lots of cool islands as opposed to heat islands, and when I look up, instead of seeing blue sky, I'll see lots of green. And I really look forward to as many people in the community as possible having a look at this document and commenting on it and offering feedback and making it better than it is. And I look forward to the revised document coming back for ratification in a few months' time.
Thank you. Councillor Nagri, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, I really want to thank the officers for the work they've done on this document. I think reading this document tonight and comparing it to the document that I spoke against a council 5 or 6 years ago when Greening Port Phillip was first approved is sort of night and day. We've come a long, long way as a city in terms of how we think about the importance of this work and the detail and considerations gone into this document. I really don't think it can be understated. We've still got a ways to go. There's a lot of unanswered questions, as people will see as they read through the document, and I encourage the community to provide feedback on that. I guess probably to kind of give some of the rationale as to why it's coming out in this form rather than waiting longer is we think this is a really important priority. I certainly do, and I think we could delay this strategy another 12 months and have a lot more numbers in those boxes, but I would much rather get this strategy underway, start planting trees, and a number of these questions can be answered with an update in another 12 months or another 2 years. There'll probably be a couple of updates. I think that's okay. This is a long strategy, but as many people have pointed out, front-loading the planting is really important, and that's why we can delay this further and have more information in our glossy document. But I think what's really important and what people actually want to see in the end is trees and plants in the ground. And so I think there's a lot of really great work in here. I really look forward to hearing what the community have to say and us continuing down the road of having a better urban forest.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Mayor. So I definitely sympathise with those residents who've turned up to ask questions or make comments on the targets and ambition in this strategy. These are questions that I've been asking for some time myself. It does look as though we have some really useful data, but we don't have everything we need in order to properly establish how we're going to achieve this, I suppose. I feel really uncomfortable in putting a draft forest strategy out for engagement that doesn't have the kinds of targets that I would have expected to be out there, but I am understanding of the reasons why that is. I suppose, as Councillor Nyagui said, it came down to a choice between delaying this further and not giving our residents an opportunity to give their feedback on it until much later, or putting it out now and promising to try and do better going forward. So I guess that's sort of the latter there is where I've sort of landed. I am happy for this to go out to engagement. I really want the very, very large sector of our community that are deeply concerned about local deforestation and what we can do to offset that, to put in their submissions and to really push us to do as much as we can. And I know that there are quite a lot of limitations to what we can do. Electrical line clearance was mentioned, for example, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't set ambitious goals and targets for ourselves in order to make sure we actually reach that greening that we're looking to do.
Thank you. I'll go next. I saw several trees planted yesterday in Julie Reserve in Port Melbourne, so it's great to see it's happening already. There's always an opportunity to take learnings from where we see trees fail, and I think it's an opportunity for the community and the open engagement to report on maybe where you think what you've seen. So if it's a larger vehicles backing into trees or something, that will help inform if we need to put some metal around them or something to really give them the best chance. So we seek that community engagement, and I will be supporting it. Anybody else speaking to it tonight? Councillor Pearl?
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. It's often times that we need to reflect and review where we've come from whilst also where we're going. And if you went to South Melbourne Town Hall before the roof fell in, you would have found two beautiful aerial photos from, I think, about the 1940s, which would have been when Australia's second most severe drought was occurring during World War II, of the aerial photographs of South Melbourne, Albert Park, a little bit of St Kilda and Port Melbourne. And you would see in those photographs that it is barren. There's no trees anywhere. There's no asphalt road, so presumably the heat wasn't as a bigger concern now as it is today. I don't recall there being asphalt roads in any case. I might be corrected, but the place was completely barren. There's also another aerial photograph in the St Kilda room in the meeting room here at Town Hall from the fourth worst drought in Australian history, which was the Millennium Drought. Where again, it looks much better than the first example I used, but nowhere near as good as what it is today. So we all want more, and every time you come to a council meeting like this, you hear about how we need to do better. But as the generations and years have gone by, we have done vastly better. There is a lot of more that we can do, and albeit we want change in policy settings, there's still lots of empty planter boxes all out across the city. So the actions that we've taken in the past haven't fulfilled their full potential because there's still 18 planter boxes that are empty on Farrar Street and Canterbury Road, which are 18 trees that were planted there in the past through council investment that for whatever reason haven't been maintained. In some cases, out the front of 201 Farrar Street in South Melbourne, we allowed the developer of that building to knock down or harvest or whatever you want to term you use 3 trees on the street that still today haven't been replanted, albeit that building was finished 3 years ago. We can reduce the maintenance bill according to the state government's bushfire guidelines by reducing the amount of clearance that's required to make sure that the guidelines given to us by the state government for electrical clearance meet our requirements as opposed to Colac Otway Shire's requirements. We can use that money that we save to ensure that we're not lopping trees down and emitting more carbon to the atmosphere by planting them in more appropriate areas where they can be sustainably grown. Those two things combined will mean we'll have a greener city 10 or 20 years from now. But the real gains need to be made on private land, which is well outside the control of the City of Port Phillip. And as we densify and our blocks consume more with less people living in the houses, but the houses appear to be getting a lot bigger, our canopy cover reduces. So more of that burden will be matched by council. But it is important to take a bit of a historical view about where we've come from and where we are going. We all want more trees, and we would love the City of Port Phillip to invent a plane tree that doesn't have those nasty golf balls on it. And if we did that, we'd probably be in a budget surplus for the next 20 or 30 years by licensing that out. But trees are important. We love those plane trees. We love what it provides our community, and this policy reflects that. But let's also focus on the big targets, but make sure we're doing the work to ensure that the stock we have is looked after, so we're saving ratepayers' money, and the actions that we've done in the past fulfil their potential. The hundreds of planter boxes across our city that are barren, that need trees in them or vegetation in them, is where we should be starting.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? All right. Councillor Martin, do you need to close? No? All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right, we're 2 hours into the meeting, so I'm going to say a 5-minute break, okay? Thank you. 8:36 back. Thank you, everyone. This is now on to 11.2, the Community Electric Vehicle Program. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to the item? Anybody catch up on your notes? Anybody have any questions tonight? Okay. All right. If no questions, I'm going to go ahead and move an alt motion. It's lengthy, but I guess I make everybody else read it, so I have to read it. So, is it 3? Sorry. Should be 3s. Yeah. So the numbers become for 3.3 that gets removed. And instead, it would say continue the private EV charger model. 3.3.1 is to permit private chargers that extend for a period of 4 years or the installation of 100 private EV chargers, whichever comes first, after which time the model will be reviewed. That permits permit applications in batches. New calls for applications will be made as existing batches are completed. That renews permits annually with audits to ensure compliance of conditions. Permit renewals could be declined if the location of private EV chargers constrains council works on council roads and footpaths. 3.3.2, continue the current criteria to private EV chargers with the following updates. Permit holders will be strongly...
Sorry, Mayor, sorry to interrupt. We can only see 1.2 on the screen. Is that what... Are you reading 3?
Can you scroll down, please, over there? It is email, but thank you for the other people online.
Thank you.
I appreciate that you're telling us. Is that how far I'm up to? I can't read that.
You're up to 1.3.2.
So it says 1, but it should be 3, by the way, 3.3.
Right.
But
okay.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm reading now. Permit holders will be strongly encouraged to hold appropriate insurance cover and are made aware by council of the risks and their legal liability in the absence of appropriate cover. All current and future permit holders will be required to register their chargers with before you dig Australia. I think you probably have to say dial before you dig. And renew the registrations as required. Applications for properties in flood-prone areas will not be considered until relevant authorities recommend approval. Existing chargers in flood-prone areas will be reviewed and permits will not be renewed. Permit application fees to be increased from $132 to $500. All of their fees will remain the same, subject to CPI, which is, for example, street occupancy permit, working with roads, reserve consent, and planning permit. A bond of $500 is paid and refunded upon completion of installation and reinstatement of footpath as per council standards. A separate bond of $500 is secured to ensure removal of charger and reinstatement of the footpath. The bond value will be assessed and increased if required based on site conditions. 3.3.3. Undertake a review of the need for private EV chargers at the end of the 4 years or the installation of 100 private EV chargers, whichever one comes first. 3.3.4, authorize resourcing of up to 0.4 FTE, which is equivalent to 50,000, and 30,000 for legal consultant fees to support implementation of private EV charger model. All right, would someone like to second it? Councillor Bond? Sorry, I got to find my paperwork.
Can I ask a question? Or?
Yeah, you can ask clarifying questions since you've seen this now. Go ahead.
Sorry, all what you've just, looking at the original council paper and all that you've just read out, normally the bit that's changed is in a different colour, but that is all different to what was.
Yeah, hey, Rhonda, we have a few people who are new to the role tonight, so we can adjust that. That's okay. We can adjust that for clarity.
Yeah, because it's just I'm swapping between what's on the screen and what's in the paper, and I'm thinking, well, that's not in a different colour, so that's my question.
We'll adjust. Through you, Mayor, I am working through the change right now to make sure it's displayed as per usual, and officers will have that on the screen within a few minutes.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Niagara, do you have a clarifying question?
Yeah, my question was just about the status of the public charges in relation to this motion. Does this change anything in relation to Council's commitments to...
First two items are as the officer's recommendation.
Through you, Mayor, that won't change. We'll still focus on the public charging, and this provides the resourcing that's required to also implement the private charging ongoing, or continue that program if that's what council wishes to do.
And just to clarify, I'd gotten advice from officers earlier today that the net cost council anticipated would be under the 0.4 FTE model was 97,320. Is that still the case? And if so, where will that money come from?
What's that one? Who am I asking? Fiona or Beth? Who should I answer that one?
Through you, Mayor, I'm gathering that's Fiona.
Oh, sorry. When you have a chance. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you. Actually, I'll defer this off to Beth McLaughlin, who's the Head of Sustainability.
Is Beth online?
She's online.
Hi, Beth.
Yes.
Hi, Beth.
Hi. Through you, Mayor. The resourcing that is currently being allocated will continue, I guess, to be allocated. So at the moment, a lot of that cost is associated with staff time and staff time across the different departments, and that will have to be absorbed into their workflows.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, so just to be clear, the $100,000 nearly dollars will just be absorbed into the existing sustainability budget, is that correct?
So no, it's not just, sorry, through you, Mayor, not just the sustainability budget. It sits across a whole raft of different departments, so planning, permits, transport, assets and the arborist team. They all play a part in reviewing, assessing and approving the permit process. And so the collection, or I guess the adding up of all of those elements adds up to the amount that you were provided this afternoon. And a lot of those areas, including ours, will need to sort of absorb a lot of that.
So you might need to take this on notice, but of that 97,000 approximately, how much would come out of the sustainability budget? How much would come out of, you're talking about arborists, I assume that would come out of our greening Port Phillip budget.
No.
Yeah, I can take that on notice and come back to you with the percentages allocated.
Through you, Mayor, my understanding is that the additional resourcing that would be required to facilitate that is in the 0.4 FTE that's been proposed to be funded if Council wishes to continue with this. There are a range of other departments that have a small amount of time allocated to each application. That hasn't been recovered in the past and it's not proposed to be recovered under this proposal. So we're talking, there might be some days' effort required from an asset team member. That's been absorbed over the past 12 months. It would be continued to be absorbed under this proposal. It's not proposed that we would provide additional FTE. It would be absorbed in the work that the arborists and others do. It won't take away money from greening Port Phillip, but it means that they won't be able to do other activities, for instance.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, can I add to that as well, Councillor Niagui? So the alt-rec tonight, it says up to 0.4 FTE firstly, so there may be some reduction in those costs quietly. In the cost you were sent today, it did say that the way that 97 was reached was 50K for that 0.4 FTE, 28,860, which was time spent by other teams, so not coming from any specific project budget, but just hours of officers' time in multiple teams. So as was just said, in permits, in assets, in heritage, in planning, in the different teams that might need to go out. And then there's $30,000 of legal fees in there as well.
Okay, so just to be clear then, so the $50,000 for the 0.4 FTE would be absorbed by the sustainability budget? Or is it an additional funding?
That's additional. Sorry.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor, that would be additional dedicated budget to whichever team we decide will end up administering this ongoing. Currently, that's the sustainability team.
Okay.
Any further clarifying questions? Otherwise, oh, sorry, Councillor Clark, thank you.
Okay, sorry, I forgot to message you. I just wanted to understand this bond proposal. Is this a new process? It seems like a new process. And is that something that can be administered within the 0.4 FTE?
One second.
And how does that work? It's paid for completion of installation and reinstatement of footpaths. So someone digs it up, we have to get a bond from them, they have to fix it, then we release it.
Beth, I think, is going to answer that.
I can take that. Through you, Mayor. So the bond is, there's two different bonds because there are two different permits required to install one of these assets. There is a permit to undertake the works in the street, and that is a bond of $500 that is returned once the asset is installed. So the bond, being a bond, is always returned to the resident. We don't get to keep that money. The second bond is associated with the occupation of street permit. That is a temporary permit, and we take that bond while that asset sits in the street and return that once the asset is removed.
And so that would be the return of that second bond is when the charger is no longer there? Is that?
Yes. So there's or when they when they decide to remove it, or when they cease with their permit, the money is returned.
So would I be right in saying if the charger has a life of 5 years, 10 years, council has to manage the bond over that period?
Yes,
and
correct. But those permits are renewed once a year, so we would have to renew that process each year.
And is that a current process that council has?
We do have bonds associated with permits. The intent of this particular permit is a temporary occupation of a street occupation permit. So it is designed for a temporary occupation of the street. So we're not using it strictly in its intended sense. So yeah, we would be holding on to that bond for a lot longer than we usually would.
And sorry, just to close out my original question, is that process of managing the bond over the 5 years and the other bonds part already included in the 0.4 of an FTE?
So the work to collect and manage that, yes, would be it would be done by permits and managed by permits. So that will be part of the resourcing that is identified. It wouldn't necessarily be managed by the sustainability team or whichever team is managing the process.
Sorry, I'm
but
still
it will
not
be
clear.
absorbed.
Is that the 0.4 FTE or is that a different department that has now an additional work?
So we are collecting a bond at the moment, but the bond amount is changing. So it's not necessarily additional work. And the 0.4 facilitates the process, but the actual bond is collected by permits. So there is work across two teams, so it may not be a completely clear answer. Apologies.
So it would be an additional bond for the permits team?
Yes.
Okay. And could I just ask that the motion be moved up to the beginning again, if that's okay, please?
Scroll, yep.
Thank you.
A page view, is that what you're asking for, Councillor Nagri? Is there another way to list it so you can see it bigger, maybe? Okay, Councillor Nagri has a question.
I just wanted to clarify whether the current 10 permits, how different this new bond system is, and whether the previous bond system was a flat rate, and we're actually now adding an additional requirement to do an assessment of the necessary bond value for the street, what was called the street permit. Occupation permit.
Through you, Mayor.
Yeah.
So we currently do collect a bond. The bond amount is increasing to 500, and we are adding a new additional bond associated with the occupation. So the first bond is currently being collected and managed, and the second bond is a new additional process.
But both were flat. Well, the previous bond was a flat bond, whereas now we're introducing a variable bond that will require an assessment.
Well, the intent is that it would be 500, but in certain circumstances, there may actually be extenuating circumstances that mean that bond is not enough to cover the removal of that asset if it were to be abandoned, for example. So we would need to collect a higher bond. But the intent is that it would be a flat rate, but under certain circumstances, we may have to vary that to make sure that we're covering council's risk.
All right, any further questions? Councillor Sirikoff?
Thank you. I just want to confirm the second bond of $500, that is to, if the charger is removed from the footpath, that $500 covers the cost of reinstating the footpath.
Through you, Mayor. The second amount is intended to cover either the correction of incorrect removal of that asset or to remove and reinstate the footpath if, for example, that asset is abandoned or the resident does not remove it at the end of their permit condition. So the amount is to cover removal and reinstatement of the nature strip and footpath under circumstances where it is either not removed or removed incorrectly.
CEO?
So if I can be really clear through you, Mayor, it is the responsibility of the person who's asked to put in and install to remove and to reinstate and to deal with all damage. The bond is in case that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Any final questions? Otherwise, I've moved this. Councillor Bond seconded it, so we'll go into the debate. Councillors, I think we've heard from the users and some others that want to use it that this has been successful so far. We live in a really fantastic place, a lot of heritage properties. We don't live in a new area where everyone can put a driveway in if that's the way they have to go about it. There is interest in uptake of EV charging or EV electric vehicles. I'm very fortunate that I have a driveway, so this won't be a problem for me, but I know all through Albert Park, Middle Park, there's so many areas of our municipalities, St Kilda, that if they want to, this is the option. And I think one of the strong arguments for why this should be supported is even if we went to the community model, the people who are owning these cars, if you take out their demand, the argument that it's going to be the best opportunity for them to charge at night at that lower rate, this is the livability that we're looking to support for our community. It's meant to be more, it's not, I understand that private, using public money, the numbers don't stack up so much, but I'm really proud that we are the pilot initiative of this. And I think it's still the right answer for our municipality, given we have so many different types of properties that will never be able to have a driveway. They park on the street, and often it's not a problem where they won't get a spot in front of their house. That's just the layout of how our municipality is. So I hope that the councillors can see tonight that we are still going and working. There's no change to that community model, which we need the state government, we need the power companies, we need everybody to keep working on that model. But it's a while away. As much as we want it to be tomorrow, we're still got to keep chipping away at it. This is here, it's working, and I think that we should keep going. The notice motion has for that option 2 given it a little bit of a change based on feedback from councillors saying, how can we be more efficient? How can this be done? I'm really pleased to see that idea that we would do this in batches for getting more streamlined about the processing of it so that we can make sure that this does stack up a little bit more internally as well. Councillor Bond, would you like to go?
One of the reasons I'm very supportive of the retention of this private EV charging model is because somehow in this whole adoption of electric vehicles, it's been the responsibility for charging your vehicle has been pushed back onto government and local councils. Now, no one is running around asking government and local councils to build petrol stations to charge petrol model cars, but if you have an electric car that requires an electric charging, it's been pretty much left to local government and state governments and federal governments to charge these vehicles for the people that have purchased them. And what we have here, and we're the first ones in Australia to do it, is we have the ability to provide electric vehicle charging at home, which for many suburbs around Australia will be quite easy to do because they have garages, they have off-street parking. But an inner-city municipality like ours doesn't. Most houses, or many houses all through South Melbourne, Port Melbourne, Albert Park, Middle Park, etc., St Kilda, they don't have driveways, they don't have the ability to charge their cars, and I don't think we want to run a system whereby everyone's going to have an extension cord running over the footpath, charging a car out the front. So we have to come up with another solution, and we have to be supportive of another solution. And in my view, this is it, where the majority of the costs here are borne by the people who purchase the electric vehicle. It's council being a little bit flexible and adjusting a few of its policies and adjusting a few of the our requirements to ensure that these people who don't have off-street parking and don't have off-street garages and driveways and all that sort of thing can somehow put in a system at mostly their expense whereby they can park their car in the street and park their car without having a whole stack of extension cords running across the footpath. So for me, this EV trial makes perfect sense, and I'm sure over time council will get better at processing these applications, and it may be a bit arduous to start with, and I'm sure we're all learning, and I'm sure the applicant, the person putting in these charges, has learnt a lot over the 10 he's put in, and we have as a council, and we should all get more efficient, and costs should start to come down as you get economies of scale with these systems coming into our municipality. So I'm highly supportive of continuing this trial in the hope that we can one day have a situation where nearly every car or every house could have its own little personal EV charger out in the nature strip or out in the footpath or somewhere, so that you can pull up out the front, plug your car in and go inside. I remember making a point in one of our councillor sessions whereby you go to a country like Canada, every car has a little cord hanging out the front of the car, and every car park has a little plug. You just turn up, plug your car in, and it stops your car from freezing over or keeps your car warm. And they do it for a very different reason over there, but there's no reason we couldn't adapt that system to the way we operate here in Australia, whereby every car eventually will have a little cord out the front or something. You turn up, you unlock your little charger in the footpath or your little charger in the nature strip, plug your car in, and away it goes, and it charges overnight. And it's the responsibility of the homeowner to charge their car, and it doesn't fall back on council to continually provide vehicle charging spots for electric vehicles. Because if we talk about the small cost here, if we have to start and provide public EV chargers all across our city, it's going to be a massive cost for councils to have to try and implement that, repair that and maintain that. And as soon as we do it, it starts to become our responsibility. And I'm happy for us to explore how it works up there in a street-by-street basis, and we can roll that out. But this is the ideal situation for me, is whereby a private person who buys their own EV vehicle takes care of their own charging requirements in their street out the front of their house. And the only way this could get better is if it had absolutely nothing to do with council whatsoever. It'd be the ideal outcome for us. So wholly supportive of this trial and wholly supportive of this outcome, and I wish you all the best, and hopefully what you learn here over the last 10 charges and the next 100 enables you to roll this out across the entire country. So all the best.
Councillor Martin.
I'd like to start off by talking about 1.1 here, where Council is committing to continuing the exploration and installation of on-street public utility pole-mounted and curbside EV charging, and there are a number of dot points there that set out the criteria. And I would be delighted if there were 2 or 3 inventors who could come to us in the next 6 to 12 months with some amazing proposals to install hundreds, if not thousands, of these across our municipality, so people who aren't just living in drivewayless, single-fronted houses, but who are in all sorts of apartments, whatever, all have the opportunity to do this. So if there are any inventors here or who have friends who are inventors, I would really encourage them to get this. And then council would be able to review the various submissions from these groups and, without being seen to be negotiating with one particular provider, come up with the best solution. In the middle of all this, of course, negotiate with external providers who would manage these on our behalf so that it wouldn't cost council a cent. So I'm really hoping that within the next 2 years this will happen. Having said that, I think it would be a very, very bad look for our council if for 2 years we stopped rolling out EV chargers per se, and we had 2 years where unless you had a driveway or unless you had a brand new apartment block, you were unable to charge your electric vehicle near your property. Now, I know that the proposal we're looking at tonight will only work in particular locations and won't work everywhere. It's not an ideal solution, but it will at least enable us to give a number of people the opportunity to put in EV charging stations they'll be able to access. And yes, it's not universal, it's not a long-term solution, but for the next, hopefully no more than 2 years, 18 months less, but certainly for the next period of time, people have that opportunity, and we'll need to give them certainty, of course, that once our new and even better schemes come through, we won't be going around ripping up the existing ones. They'll be able to have tenure for 4 or 5 years or whatever. It would be even better if we're in a position where we had 2 or 3 vendors now that we could choose from. There is only one provider, and I understand, given that there is only one provider and that people are very comfortable with that provider, that we can continue to work with the existing provider for the next couple of years. With the changes in the alt-rec that the Mayor's put forward, where we've looked at addressing some of the costs to our council officers, it means that we aren't distracting council officers from the very, very important task of working with people out there to ensure that we are able to bring in some almost universal form of EV charging, so that their involvement in managing this program will be funded separately from their core funding, which enables them to continue with this very, very important job of implementing paragraph 1.1. But I hope, colleagues, that you'll support 1.3 so that for the next 2 years at least, for at least some of the good people in Port Phillip, if they want the opportunity to access an EV charger, they'll be able to do this using our current provider, while at the same time our officers won't be distracted from the very, very important task of going ahead and coming up with a long-term, almost universal solution that will look after all of the people in Port Phillip.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a number of concerns with this rec. The management of bonds, the management of trying to go back 5 years later to recover $500 in 5 years' time. We don't get much for $500 now, let alone potentially covering the cost of the reinstatement of football. But footpath 3, there's a lot of bureaucracy being introduced in this motion. We have had council officers advise us that this is not their recommendation. They've advised us that this is not a good use of council officers' time, and I think that is a recommendation we should be seriously considering. The $500 doesn't recover the full cost to council of managing these installations, and what we have here is people who can afford to spend this money getting council resources and council money to effectively, partially, to some extent, cover the cost of their installation at the expense of the people who can't afford to pay for these installations. So we effectively have all residents funding people who can afford to put in a charger at the expense of the people who can't afford to put it in. And obviously, at this stage, it's still a minority of people who even need a charger. So I don't think this is good use of council resources. I appreciate that people want chargers, but I don't think this is the way to go. And I won't be supporting this motion, and I foreshadow if it fails, I'll support the original council officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next? Councillor Nagui.
It's not often that I agree with Councillor Clark, but here we are. I also don't support this. There's a number of reasons why, and I'll go through them. I think the intention here, I guess I probably want to say from the outset, I really do think there are really good intentions here. I think everyone who's engaged in this trial so far has done so because they want to expand the access and use of EVs, which is something I wholeheartedly agree with. I want us to have more electric vehicles in the community. I want us to address our climate emergency obligations. But when looking at the results of this trial so far and considering both the kind of philosophical and broader strategic outcomes if we were to continue to go down this road, but also looking at it from a sober, practical lens, this simply isn't the way to go forward. Firstly, in terms of the kind of, I guess, philosophical approach to this, ultimately what we are doing here is privatising public space for the exclusive use of certain residents. I think in an environment where this is not going to be something that is available to every or even most residents, this is going to be less than 10% of residents, based on the briefings we've received from council officers, a tiny fraction of our community. Once you exclude the half of our community who rent, the vast numbers of people who live in apartments and other multi-dwelling buildings, when you remove people in flood overlays and et cetera, you find there's a very small fraction of our community who can actually access this. And were we to roll this program out to its fullest extent tomorrow, we would have a situation where we've basically we've changed our streets so that in large swathes of particularly Middle Park and Albert Park, effectively every parking spot will be allocated to each house because those charges can only be used by the people who live in that house. And I think that is a completely inequitable situation. If we were talking about curbside charges that could be used by other community members, that would be a different proposition entirely. But I think about my own street, if every single terrace house has a curbside charger, we've effectively just privatised the parking in that street because the spot in front of my house is only for me, the spot in front of my neighbour's house is only for them. And so I think we really need to think seriously about whether that's actually the approach that we think is appropriate in terms of EV transition. I don't think it is. I think it's an outrageous proposal, particularly given that such a large percentage of our community will never have an ability to access that same use of our public space. In terms of the practicalities of this also, we're completely ignoring council officer advice. They've made it very clear throughout all the briefings that this is impractical. I've heard some really useful and important feedback from the community, and I'm glad that we extended this a further month. But ultimately, when I look at these numbers soberly, we are putting ourselves through a huge amount of work, complex work that's taken time. We had councillors who've said repeatedly that they wanted to do this 6, 7, 8 years ago, and it's been repeatedly delayed because these processes are so complicated. And to think that suddenly all of these are just going to magically go away and that we can continue to do this program and in fact expand it and do public charging when we already know we have missed all of our previous deadlines and things have cost more than we expected is just delusional. It makes me angry because I think this ultimately will further delay our officers' time from addressing the climate emergency and getting more public charges that will benefit thousands and thousands of people. And instead we're going to spend nearly $100,000 a year, which even if it meets the target of 100 charges over the next 4 years, that's $4,000 we are spending per person so that they can have a private charger in public space that can only be used by them. Meanwhile, thousands of people around a municipality, renters, people in multi-unit developments, will have no access to electric vehicle chargers and will have to wait further time. Because even if we do put this extra money, and that's money we're not spending on public charges, and it's also time that our officers are not spending on it. Because it's not just that extra 0.4 FTE, which was 0.6 in the original recommendation. I suspect that's probably how much time it'll actually take. But we're also talking about their manager and their manager's manager. There are a lot of people in our council organisation that will need to spend time dealing with this program that will ultimately, if it's a total success, deliver 100 private charges in public space. Meanwhile, we're further delaying the rollout of public charges. I think that people in the future will look back at this decision and think, what on earth was this council thinking? And I really hope that councils around Melbourne and the rest of Australia who look at this model realise that this is not ready. If we were talking about charges that could be used by anyone in the community, it would be a completely different conversation. But it's not. We're talking about people having exclusive use of a charger in the public realm in front of their house, privatising large swathes of our streets. I think it's completely unfair, and I urge my colleagues, especially those who are concerned about council waste and duplication, to not support this.
Councillor Baxter, you have a clarifying question?
Yeah, just a clarifying question for officers. Obviously, the charges that are installed under this existing program can only be used by the resident, but can the parking spot continue to be used by everyone? I thought that was the case.
Through you, Mayor, the parking spots, the use of the park out the front is not exclusive. It is available to anybody to park in.
Sure. And just to follow up, so, residents who do choose to install these chargers are aware and understand that there may be times when they actually don't have access to their charger because they don't have exclusive use of that parking spot. Is that right?
That is made aware to them when they sign up to the program. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter, would you like to speak to her? Or you just had your questions.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. What was that?
Did you want to speak to her or you just had your question?
I just wanted that clarifying question because Councillor Nyagui seemed to be saying something else.
Okay, got it. Anyone else speaking to it? Councillor Pearl?
Happy to support the amendment. Lots of different views on this, and they're all have an element of truth into them in many respects, but people get to choose what type of car they want. Our municipality is slightly different, well, similar to the inner city municipalities, but different in that we don't have driveways and garages and ample supply where people can charge if they choose to do so, go buy a very expensive electric car. So, quite right, we are privatising public property, but I don't really think it's that invasive from the ones I've seen so far. In fact, most people don't even notice they're there, and I drive past one very regularly and the car park is vacant a lot of the time, and I think I've only seen the car charging there a few times, and I'll drive past it probably 4 to 10 times a day, depending on what I'm up to. A small example, but a reasonable one. We do need to make sure that we don't have a whole heap of junk sitting in the footpaths if there's a better solution 5 or 10 years down the track that then council has to clean up. I'm wondering, I was going to put this, but I'm wondering perhaps if the officers could consider a better way of doing a deposit system. Maybe we just add the deposit as a liability on the rates notice of the house, so we attach it to the house at say $2,000. So then if it isn't paid for in 5 years' time, then we can use the debt collection system through the rates notice. Probably can't levy that as a charge or something, but there's got to be a better way of doing it than the administrative burden deposit process. But no, I'm okay to support this. Lots of things were said before, but let's remind ourselves of the history again. We're the only council that's doing this, and I find it interesting that people feel the need to come here and I'll say it, bag council out, saying we're not doing enough or we're incompetent. There's no one else doing this. So we're working out how to do it properly. Yes, there's charging facilities in this town hall, but they don't sit under the ground in the pavement. They sit on the walls where we have flood drainage systems, etc. It's not as dire as many people that sat in that chair and talk about. We're wading through something that's never been done in Victoria before. We should be commended for taking a leap of faith on a product that still hasn't reached a commercial standard. And this amendment allows that to potentially continue to flourish. But it's not without its issues. And you can see those starting to crop up here in our council. That may mean in the future we may be the only one that does this, because it is quite right. Councillor Nagy talks about privatisation of the public sphere and the limited benefit it does provide. That is all actually true. But Councillor Bond also truly says, well, I think it's true, in terms of it's not the role of the City of Port Phillip to get into fuel provision for electric cars, motor cars or any other type of car. That's not something we need to get involved in. The City of Port Melbourne got out of power stations in the 1990s. I don't intend the City of Port Phillip to get into the power business anytime soon, unless the business case is enormously great, then I might be swayed. But the policy says you want more electric cars in the city. Then you need to work out ways of improving it. At the moment, they're very expensive. Albeit I read that they're coming down in price and the second-hand market is starting to burgeon forward. Most of the people that can afford these cars at the moment are very high asset owners and very high income earners, and they want to park the cars out the front of their house to charge them up. That's not the way it should be, but that's the reality of the situation it is at the moment. So if you want to increase electric car ownership, you have to remove barriers to entry. This policy allows us to do that on a private and a public front, and I'm very happy to support it here tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Sirkoff?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, yeah, I've actually seen power cords draped from a property across the footpath, draped through trees and then plugged into the car. And I don't think this is a really good way to go, that we will see a whole street of, instead of lights being strung through our high streets, we will end up seeing power cords being strung across and along our footpaths. And I don't think this is the right way to go at all. I am supportive of trying out this, or further rolling out curbside charges, because I think we see the need for it. We want to see more EVs out there. We want to see a more positive outcome going forward for how energy is being consumed. We have many, City of Port Phillip is a very old heritage area and it's highly dense, and so we don't have, we can't go back fitting garages and crossovers to properties because they just don't exist. And so the only alternative for residents who do want to purchase a vehicle, and that is to have a curb charge in the footpath. And it's just the reality of it. And when we had over a month ago, when we were presented with this, we were informed that yes, there is only 7%. There's only 7% of properties who are eligible to be installing these curbside charges. As Councillor Niagui pointed out, there are a few, but the fact is there is only a few due to the flood mapping, that it's not going to be a case where we're going to be seeing them along in front of every single property, so or across the whole of the City of Port Phillip. The provider of the curb charge has provided information to us with all the steps, the checks and balances that has to be done. And as I see it, it's the provider who will be doing all those ticks and checks and crossing the T's and dotting the I's with the applicant to make sure that everything's done. So a lot of the responsibility falls with the provider and not with council officers. As I see it, yes, there will be a small cost to council, but that's minimal to what we will get in the long term for those properties that will never have a driveway where they can take their vehicle up onto their own property to charge their vehicle. So I'm only too happy to support this motion tonight, or this alt-rec, because I think it's a way forward. And I think it's a good outcome for people who do want to have a vehicle where they don't have to go somewhere in the middle of the night, line up for an hour to charge their vehicles. At the moment, when you fill up your petrol tank, it's 5 to 10 minutes, you're out. If you're actually having to find somewhere to charge your vehicle, you could be there for an hour lining up behind other vehicles. And the last thing we want is people lining up the late hours of the day or the night, especially at night, charging their vehicles. This is a way for people to have their vehicle parked out the front of their properties. They are safe at home and not waiting in a long queue. And until we get a more faster and efficient way of doing public charges, and that could be, for instance, in supermarket shopping centre car parks, as Councillor Bond said, that where they in places overseas you can just plug in your vehicle. Until supermarkets do something like that, the only alternative really for the safety of residents, so they're not waiting for hours charging their vehicles, is to have, in the meantime, a curb charge mechanisms out the front of their properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Any councillors that haven't spoken yet want to speak? Councillor Crawford, are you? No, you're good. Okay. All right, then I'm going to take the opportunity to close. All right. So thank you, officers. I know it's hard when we don't follow the advice exactly, but I think that we understand why you're risk averse to it, the lawyers, everybody involved, because it is something that maybe has opportunities to go wrong, but there's also every opportunity for it to go right too. We are definitely using public resources, but I think that in the long term, this will benefit us because we have, beyond the properties that don't have driveways, we have apartment buildings that cannot upgrade their power supply. They're already at the max, the use, everyone's getting more electrics inside. They can't also add the chargers without putting a substation in or something else. It's not, they don't have the space to do it. So it's physically not able for them. So wherever we can reduce the load of our municipality and all the people who will come to visit, we'll have influxes during the high season who want to be using the chargers. This is the opportunity where we are taking that off and allowing that livability for our people. An idea for you, Rod, opportunity for the shared economy. You know, why couldn't, if this was at my house, I know it's not for my house, maybe there's an app. There's something that can make it where it could be shared with the neighborhood. It would be that ultimately I'm paying the bill, but there's a way that it's ticketed through the app about how much was used by that neighbor. There's so much opportunity here that it can service the neighborhood. It could be the answer in the interim for not just one-to-one use. Okay? So I think that this is something that people should have faith in. We may get it wrong. We might look back and say, oh, that probably wasn't the best. But we are still charging forward with our public use. So it's a win-win in my opinion, and I hope that people are convinced by that. But let's go to the vote. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed? That's carried.
Division.
All right, division. We'll do the vote again. All those in favour? So we got Bond, Sirikoff, Martin, Pearl, Consolo. Keep your hands up. And Crawford and Baxter. And against, all those against? Councillor Nyagui and Councillor Clark. That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're on to the next item. Let me find my papers. This is now 13.1, proposal to lease 129 Beaconsfield Parade, Albert Park. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to the report? Just making sure there's no questions right now for 129 Beaconsfield Parade. All right, if not, we got an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something else? Thank you, Councillor Bond. Councillor Nyagui to second. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak to it? No. Councillor Nyagui, would you like to speak to it?
Yeah, just to say, I think we're really eager to get somebody from the community. I'm hopeful we could potentially find someone from a community group or the like, but if we find a commercial tenant, that's all good as well. It's a bit of a peculiar site, this one, but I'm sure with enough engagement we can find somebody, whether that be a business or otherwise, that can utilise this space a bit better. And I'm hopeful we can also find a way to make the facade a little bit more in keeping with its heritage appeal and a bit less like a weird kind of glass box.
Great. Anybody else speaking to it? All right, Councillor Pearl.
Just had one of those thoughts. I'd encourage officers to go and advertise this widely and unusually, and by that I mean tell the story of the history of this building. In terms of, I understand there was quite a very well-known restaurant that used to operate out of there. Get that in the broadsheet. Identify to certain parts of the community and certain industries that this is available. Let's not just pop it up on a, I don't know, realcommercial.com.au or something like that. Let's see if we can find some unique people that will turn this space into a beautiful and used space. So there's one of my random ideas, but very happy to put this out, as we all want to see this building used in some way, shape or form, and hopefully to a significant community benefit.
Great. Anybody else want to speak to the item? Councillor Sirikoff?
Yeah, I think what's called Boys and Gulls.
Mm-hmm.
The name of the restaurant. Boys and Gulls. Boys and Gulls. Gulls.
Boys, yeah, like in the water and gulls in the sky. Clever. All right. Excellent. Okay, are we ready to go to the vote on that one? Everybody paying attention? Ready for the vote? All those in favour? It's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right, 13.2, City of Port Phillip Strategic Memberships Review 2024. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to the report? Questions? Sorry, Councillor Martin.
I note in the motion there's reference to some concern about SECA and our membership in item in dot point 3. Have we got any clarification about the accuracy of that statement?
Who am I referring to? You or Lauren?
Through you, Mayor. I understand we have had confirmation that there's acceptance of the proposal from SECA.
Through you, Mayor, we have confirmation that the proposal that is mentioned in the recommendation in the report this evening is confirmed by SECA.
Perfect. Okay. Councillor Farrell.
And when are we doing a review of this this list again? Point 3.5, is it? Let's have a look, just checking you're right. You are right.
Good job. All right. Any other questions? No? Okay. Otherwise, Councillor Crawford is moving this. Who would like to second it? Pop your hands up. Niagri, thank you.
Can I request we vote in parts?
Yeah? What are your requests?
3.4 be voted separately to everything else.
Hold up. Let me find it. Okay. Yeah, that's easy because it's at the bottom. Yep. 3 point. What? Why is it 3.5? I have a 3.4. No, go to not that. Where's the? Is that it? Oh wait, it's not highlighted. That's what I was wondering. Why is it 3.4 on mine?
We could do 3.1 to 3.3, including 3.5 as one part.
Is it 3.5? It should be 3.4. Oh, I see. It's not the last thing. Yeah, so we'll put that down. Yeah, got it. Yep, thank you. Got it. Yep. All right, I'm fine with that request. It'll be 3.1 to 3.3 and 3.5 in one more vote, and then we'll do 3.4 last. Yes?
Can I ask that we all just speak once, then, if we're going to separate it out?
No, we'll just speak once, and then we'll do the vote, 2 votes at the end. Yep, fair? Okay. Any further questions? No? All right. Councillor Crawford moved it. Councillor Niagri seconded it. Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak to it?
Very quickly, we have done this so many times, and I know there are differing opinions on the value of the memberships, but part of the game is it's networking and you need to be in the room. So I would urge my councillors to maybe let's not debate it too much, just vote on this one. There is a lot of value in a lot of these things, and it may not be the value to you personally, but there are a lot of other councillors that get value from these various ones, and I participated in all of them, and I would just urge you to vote for them all.
Thank you. Councillor Niagri, would you like to speak to it?
It was actually my first time doing this, and I've sat in the other over there and bemoaned some of our choices in the past. It's nice to be sitting in the decision chair tonight on these. I've certainly, among councillors, bemoaned and been concerned about some of the choices of SECA and its value for money. I think this approach is one that I'm happy to support. I think it's making it really clear to the organisation that, as it should be, that these kind of alliances need to align with the priorities of each individual member and ultimately deliver for our action on climate emergency goals, and not just simply be another talk fest or another place to hire additional people to talk about things. I think at times they've probably been quite poor at communicating what they do. I've certainly stressed that to Councillor Martin a number of times as our delegate. I don't want to read long-winded things. I want them to be really clear with us about what they're delivering. I think this approach of having a lower membership fee and then participating in projects that align with our climate emergency plans, I think is the most sensible way forward. And I think if that doesn't work, then I think we should reserve our right to withdraw from SECA and look at other greenhouse alliances, including the Eastern Alliance for Greenhouse Action. We're in a slightly strange position in Melbourne in that you would assume, as is the case with a number of the other groupings, that they are based on kind of inner Melbourne, etc. But they kind of all start in inner Melbourne and splay outwards, like pizza wedges. And so ours, it doesn't connect us with places like Yarra and City of Melbourne and others. It actually connects us with Mornington Peninsula and all the way down to Bass Coast Shire, which has some benefits, but does mean we are a slightly unusual grouping of councils. So yeah, I'm hopeful that we can find a way to make sure that this membership does keep delivering for us, and if it doesn't, I'll be very happy for us to withdraw and look at a different group.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to it? Councillor Martin?
I'll just speak to second membership since the others don't seem to be contentious. I've been council second delegate now for 2 years, and I've seen some very interesting and positive changes in SECA. The new CEO is a Port Phillip resident, very aware of our issues and very involved. And I'm on repeat, if someone can just take the feedback away. We saw in the CEO's report a couple of the examples of some of the excellent work that SECA's done. In the last 12 months, they've established a partnership with the Minderoo Foundation, so they're looking at doing a lot of self-funding. So as Councillor Niagi says, it may well be that there's been a view in the past that we sit at one particular end of the area that's covered by SECA, and there are some councillors who've expressed reservations. Are we getting our money's worth or not? I certainly believe we are. We're going to be getting better, more than value for money in that we're getting a membership at a significantly discounted rate. And as Councillor Niagi says, it'll be up to SECA and myself to show you, if we carry this motion in toto, that this has been money very well invested. I'm very confident it will be. And I urge councillors to support these memberships. And then when we come to a review in 2 years' time, hopefully that process will be a very straightforward one.
Thank you. Councillor Pearl?
I deeply regret getting this review done 6 years ago, because we've wasted so much time and money reviewing these memberships, albeit we've reduced the membership substantially. But I'll say it kills me every time we review this. It's good work, but it's a lot of work. It's unnecessary work, in my view, and we need to extend this out to like 4 years. I like the way you've tiered it. I won't say that. The Committee of Melbourne, like, seriously, it's time to move on. They put a position to advocate for the merger of inner city councils and then backtracked, if I recall, but yet we still stay in it. And frankly, the Committee of Melbourne was a great committee for Melbourne in the 1990s, in particular to revitalise a city that desperately needed it. It desperately needs it now. I think they could lift their performance a bit based on the way our city and particularly our CBD is at the moment, and they should probably focus on the CBD. I understand we get some advocacy advantage, but that's not a membership I've ever been a fan of, and I haven't become one since. The double up, which I know we keep on dividing them, but the double up between the VLGA and I was about to say the MUA. We're not members of the MUA yet. And the MAV, rather, I think, let's just be members of the MAV. That's the pinnacle body. Oh, yes, the VLGA does training. I'm like, yes, so does everybody these days. So I would say we should narrow it down to that one. M9 should never, ever have a subscription fee for any reason whatsoever. So as it innately starts to chip in there that, we need to have a fee to pay for the bureaucracy that's now been created under M9, that we put in place the structure to replace the bureaucracy of the organisation this thing replaced. We must never, ever have a bureaucratic infrastructure around this. It's the City of Melbourne that allows them to be able to have a lobby group which allows them to have more influence over the state government. Now, we have advantages in this, but they should be the one that subsidise that organisation, not us ever, is my view. So very happy to be part of it, but we went into it on the condition it didn't cost us anything, and we should stay in it on that condition, because I can guarantee you we are getting value for money if we're paying nothing for it. Absolutely, 100%. Fully support it. We had an officer's recommendation in 2017 to get out of SECA, and stay out of SECA. To stay out of SECA. We weren't in SECA, and there was no recommendation to go into SECA. And the basis of that was, to a point of what Councillor Nagy was talking about, is that we're a bit of an odd couple. It's a bit like Eddie Maguire suddenly going for Carlton, us being part of this group. We all love football. Eddie loves football, Carlton loves football, Collingwood loves football. We're all passionate about these issues, but we just don't fit. And we haven't got value for money for the hundreds of thousands of dollars we've invested here. Officers didn't recommend it to begin with to get in there. It was moved from the floor from councillors that wanted to be part of this group. I've been to this group. Ironically, one of the functions I went to was a golf course, and literally the person was putting petrochemical fertiliser on the greens out the front. And there's a certain irony to it, but it was a good session in terms of sharing things, and what mayors had electric cars and those sorts of things, and bemoaning the federal and state governments on their inaction. But the tools that this group utilises is becoming less relevant, in my view, based on the annual reports that I've read that sit in our councillor study, as opposed to more relevant. And we're not getting value. We're not getting value for money. So it will probably get up again here tonight, but it shouldn't. And we're not getting, a reasonable return for the considerable investment we're making. The good news is the scrutiny that's been put on the membership means we've finally been able to go and crack a better bargain for ratepayers and a better bargain for the City of Port Phillip. So that's a good thing, because I suspect it will get up, but we should be out of this. I hope this review doesn't come back to council on these ones for a very long time. Thank you, Councillor, for indicating the right time frame. 2 years is too short. This should be 10 years on the strategic ones almost. It's a waste of council time, particularly in the first 2 years of a new council. Most of these are operational issues. They were dealt with as operational issues before 2017. We should go back to that and call them in by exception. Thanks very much.
I'll add, no, it's just a voting separate. I'll add my part. I've been to a few of these more recently, given my role as mayor, and I actually do find immense value in M9, and it's maybe changed a little bit since when you were mayor, Councillor Pearl, that we're now looking at portfolios, not portfolios, but looking at the strategic focuses, and then having ownership councils essentially of who's going to be the lead on that. And so it's not just the City of Melbourne, and I think there's a lot of overlapping interests. I know we can turn around and look at Bayside has some overlapping interests as well, but as the Intercity 9, yes, Melbourne is probably the most benefiting of all of it. However, there's quite a lot of value in it. I'm a lukewarm on some of the other ones, but I think that the officers are recommending it, so I'm happy to go with it. And I hope that we can have a space in between reviews as well. Anybody else speaking to it? Okay. All right, let's go to the vote. So we're going to do 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.5 in the first vote. I'll do a second vote for 3.4, which is a SECA separately. Okay? Everyone's across that? All right, first vote for the 4 items, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.5. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Okay, thank you. Those in favour of 3.4 for the second membership? All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, it's carried. Thank you. Okay, let's keep going. 13.3, this is the proposed discontinuation of a road in Johnson Street, South Melbourne, in part. It's not all of Johnson Street. Okay. Getting late. Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers in relation to the report? You're moving it? You're moving us along. Thank you. Councillor Nyagri to move it. Councillor Crawford a second. Councillor Nyagri, are you speaking to it? Councillor Crawford, are you speaking to it? Anybody else? Okay, Councillor Martin.
Just putting my ward council hat on, I think this is an amazing example of how we can work with a developer to get a really, really good urban forest green outcome on a section of council property that's not very well used, and it's going to be an amazing community resource at So no direct cost to council. We're simply foregoing some developer contributions which we're going to use to develop this park. So I think it's a great initiative.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Okay. On to 13.4. This is the status of council decisions and questions taken on notice recorded by council for the 1st of January to the 31st of March 2024. Councillors, do you have any questions on this item? No, you're so quick. Okay, who's going first? Okay, Councillor Crawford to move it. Councillor Nyagri to second. This is becoming a fun one. Okay, Councillor Crawford, are you speaking to it? Councillor Nyagri? Anybody else? No? All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? And it's carried unanimous. Thank you. Okay, 13.5, record of informal meetings of council. We have an officer's alt, inclusion of 2.2 to address an error. Is that on the screen? Scroll down. So 2.2, request officers to correct the 8th May 2024 Port Phillip 0 briefing record to reflect that Councillor Nyagri attended the briefing virtually. Wow, my eyes are going. Yes, I think that's what it says. Okay. Councillor Nyagri to move it. Councillor Martin to second it. Councillor Nyagri, would you like to speak to it?
No, just to restate that I attended that meeting virtually.
Okay. Thorough. Councillor Martin? No. Anybody else speaking? All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're now on to notice of motions. There's 2 tonight. We're going to start with 14.1. This is a motion raised by Councillor Crawford in relation to caravan parking. Councillor Crawford, you'll like to move this, and Councillor Baxter would like to second it. Yes, now I'll go to questions. Councillor Martin?
So if this motion is carried, would officers be investigating not just the specifics of Alexandra Street, but other areas where this is an issue as well? In other words, I'm killing 2 birds with 1 stone, perhaps.
Through you, Mayor, I'd make a commitment that we'll look at the broader issues. I don't know if we'll look at it street by street, but in considering what we do in this particular street, we'll look at the broader issues from a citywide perspective.
Any further questions? Councillor Crawford?
I know I'm bringing the motion, but there has been some mention that there have been people camping there. Is it possible for officers to, I don't know if they have been patrolling that area, but is that possible to check so we might be able to move a few on in the meantime?
Through you, Mayor, that's possible.
And one other question. Yep. I know that you just said, CEO, that this is the start of the thinking for the broader issue that we know has been increasing in the city. Given the extent of Alexandra Street, I know there's no time frame on this. Is this possible to do it in a timely fashion? I guess I'm just trying to, hopefully not before, given the scale of it, I just wondered if there's kind of any time frame. Do we need to put that in, or is there a timely way to do this initial street, and then perhaps the longer term is probably a new council?
CEO?
Through you, Mayor, I haven't really discussed with the team what kind of time frames we could do it within. We'll undertake to come back to you on that, and that within the resourcing that we have, that we'll try to do this part as quickly as we can.
I have Councillor Clark for a question, and then I'll come back to you. Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to ask officers that if, subject to obviously what the response will be or the potential solutions on Alexander Street, how do we manage this across the municipality who are also facing just as many problems in other streets as this street? So for example, if council comes out with a solution, which would be great, how do we then stop a plethora of other streets following up?
Through you, Mayor, I think the intention is that we'll look at solutions that would be applicable more broadly. I don't think there may be some bespoke solutions for potential streets, and that might be what we have to look at in this particular case. But as part of that, we'll look at what solutions are available to be applied more broadly. The current kind of options that we've looked at are quite narrow and require us to think a bit differently. But the commitment would be that we'll look at broad options that would be applicable potentially across the municipality or in those hotspots. But I think there's always going to be a level of having to do it on a street basis as well, depending on the particular situation. Like we heard some different views around what the solution might be for Alexander Street in terms of what residents might want to do with that space, for instance, as opposed to broader policy-based approaches that we might take.
Could I just follow that up again?
Yes.
And don't disagree with what you just said. However, the core of the motion is boats, caravans, trailers, which are currently permanently parked on my street and a number of other residents. So I guess it would seem to make some sense to me anyway that the core element is consistent across the entire municipality and maybe worse in some suburbs than others, in some streets than others. But I think we're going to have to look at, in terms of the broader implications for how we respond to Alexander Street, potentially for the whole of the municipality.
Through you, Mayor, we agree. I agree.
Thank you.
Councillor Sirikoff.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wanting to clarify that this will be addressing moving on, or looking at the impact of caravans, boats and vans, whatever, that's taking up car spaces, and the number of car spaces will not be reduced in any way, and car spaces will not be removed to be replaced with parkland. I'm raising this question because one of the speakers tonight inferred that they were wanting some of these car spaces on Alexander Street to be converted into parkland. So we are retaining car spaces for residents' amenity.
Through you, Mayor, any change like that would need to come back for consideration and from council and also from community engagement. I'm not writing off any particular solution at the moment. We'll look broadly and we'll look at the specifics in the particular streets. So it's not from a citywide perspective, we'll be looking at options that don't necessitate turning it into parkland. But if this local community wants that to be investigated as part of this, then there's nothing stopping us from looking at it. I'm not committing that we would do it or not do it. But ultimately, it'd be in consultation with the community, a decision for council.
So to follow up, I'm supportive of this notice of motion, given that we are addressing the amenity of residents' car parking.
All right, pause. What's the point of order?
Could that be...
Can I clarify that?
No, you need pause. Everyone needs pause. What's the point of order?
Councillor Sirikoff is making a statement rather than asking a question.
Okay, yep, I think that's fair. Let's leave that for the debate, but leave it to questions only. So don't tell us what you're worried about. Maybe just go to the questions and ask questions. Yep? Do you have any more?
Yeah, so to clarify, will council be trying to maintain and maximise the number of car spaces, maintain the car spaces that already exist on this street?
I think that's been answered. All right, Councillor Nyagui.
Are councillors able to just introduce like a temporary or ongoing parking restriction at a council meeting, or do we need to go through a protracted process?
Who's taking that one? Fiona, are you available?
Sorry, through you, Mayor. I think that Tom Mason is online for that one.
Hi, Tom. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Hey.
Can I just have the question repeated? I didn't catch the full question.
Could councillors at a meeting decide to introduce temporary or permanent restrictions on the street, or will we need to go through a process first?
So the typical process for changing parking restrictions is a consultation process with the affected residents or businesses of the street. Councillors could technically make a decision to change the restrictions at a council meeting. However, the process now is to go through that formal consultation process to understand the level of support before a change is implemented.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify whether it's currently possible under legislation to restrict through, say, local laws, particular vehicles from the street, or whether that's... Because we could certainly look at exploring it. I just wanted to clarify whether that's actually something that could be explored as an option, say, having a local law that required a permit to park a trailer on the street in Port Phillip, for example.
Through you, Mayor, officers are aware that other municipalities have a local law that specifies specific vehicle types that are not permitted to park for specific durations.
Good to know. Thank you. All right, Councillor Martin.
Mayor, we heard earlier tonight from speakers in the gallery that there's a street in Eastern Kilda, I think it's Alexandra Street, where there's rubbish and perhaps antisocial behaviour. Would it be possible perhaps to clear the street for a day to do a proper sweep through, and that we'd probably need to introduce temporary parking restrictions for a day in order to have that clean up of the street?
Yeah, this is part of it's Alexandra Street. Okay, I think we've got some nodded heads. They can look at that. Any further questions? Otherwise, let's get into the debate. Okay, Councillor Crawford, you've moved it. You go ahead first.
So actually the motion is about investigating options, because I don't think it's not as clear-cut as everything we're suggesting here, but they could be the answers to Alexandra Street. About a month ago, I did raise my concerns with the CEO regarding Alexandra Street. Some community members had raised it, but I had driven there myself and seen the extent and the sort of expansion of that car park. And the reason I put in for information over a month ago and then obviously bringing it to a formal motion last week was because it is at a scale that perhaps no other street has, even though the other streets in the municipality do struggle with this, and the reason I'm bringing it is there's a much larger need to be addressed now. Our current policy is around surveying the street, and I think this requires us to act more directly. And so I'm bringing the motion to override our current policy to look at other options for that street, because changing a 4-hour time restriction, will that help? Will it just move people around the corner? I'm not sure. That's why we've asked officers to look at it. But it is the start of that bigger conversation that has become, as we densify, harder when we basically are privatising. We've been talking about a lot of privatising of public space here at the moment, but that's a definite privatising of public space. Our car spaces, the ones outside your house, are not yours. Any car space is not yours, and the idea of them is for people to come and go, so it's used by many different people. And currently we should be charging money because it's become a caravan storage area. So as I said, it's a bit of a wicked problem in a city that has contested space, whether it's for public parklands, for car parking, for people, for dog parks, whatever it might be. I do think we have to think about this in a bigger, more innovative way, and I agree with the CEO. It might be broadly across the municipality, but there might be niche solutions depending on the street. I'm hoping you will support this for the investigation without parameters at this point in time, because we don't want to have the unintended consequences and we can't foresee them all now. I acknowledge that there are other areas in the municipality that are struggling with this, but I think that is part of a much longer timeline in solution, and right now I'm hoping that we can focus on Alexandra Street. Maybe it's a trial on a solution and see how it works and the impacts it has, rather than bringing in something straight away. I don't know, but I'm looking forward to finding out, hopefully in a very timely manner, what officers come back with, so that we can disperse or make them pay for the privatisation of public space. I hope you support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Baxter?
Thank you, Mayor. Yep, I want to support us looking into this particular issue. Obviously, we've had a couple of other councillors talk about how this is not an issue that's limited to just Alexandra Street, St Kilda East, but this one is a particularly egregious example. And Councillor Crawford and I went and visited this street some time ago, almost 2 months ago, I think, and have had a number of conversations since that time about and making inquiries of officers about what can be done, whether that be a simple change to parking restrictions, or whether we need to look at a broader local law change, in terms of how we define certain vehicles on the road. I also know there was a newspaper article a couple of days ago on this issue, and a couple of residents have since contacted us regarding that. It is good and timely that Councillor Crawford had actually put in this motion by at least last week in order to get it onto the papers for this week. So the suggestion from some residents that we only do things when the media bails us up about it is completely incorrect. We were and have been already moving on this and have been making the necessary inquiries. I do think that for this particular location, the solution might be as simple as a simple parking restriction. Just an 8p or a 10p or something like that. It could be as simple as that. It could be more complex, of course. But I do think that we actually do need to, and this will probably be next term, but turn around to doing another look at our parking policy and how it intersects with local laws, and a really comprehensive look at how we can make sure that our public streetscapes are meeting the highest and best use, which can sometimes be for storage of parked cars. That's, obviously there's street parking is not going to go anywhere anytime soon. But as we've seen with business parklets and other examples, there are sometimes much better things you can do with that public space. So I think this is this is one step in a bit of a journey that I think we should be going forward.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to the item? Councillor Bond.
A couple of years ago, I was driving down Alexandra Street on the way to an Albert Jacka memorial on a Sunday afternoon, as happens in January. And I looked in the rear vision mirror and I saw a resident crossing the road with a whole heap of rubbish, and they walked across to the verge at the end of the car parks in question here, dumped it on the verge, threw it on the verge and walked back into the house. So I went round the corner, parked my car and thought, I'll go back and take a photo of that and report it through to council, as I am known to do from time to time when I see bits of dump rubbish on the street. And I took a photo and I was standing there writing my email to the help desk saying, can someone come and collect this? And I didn't see which house they came out of, so I couldn't assign it to a house, but I thought, we'll get someone collect it anyway. And while I'm typing my email, he comes out with the next lot. So I'm standing there taking a photo of his rubbish. He's walked across the road with all this stuff, and he's holding it in his hands. And I don't know what house he came out of, so I've got that house number as well. He just looks at me and goes, what are you doing? I said, I'll just take a photo of all the dumped rubbish here. And I said, now I know which house it's come out of. He goes, why do you care? And he didn't use that exact language, but it was a little bit different than that. And I sort of said, well, Councillor of the City of Port Phillip, and I'm sick of people like you dumping their rubbish. So he goes, no, this is reported. We've put it through the thing. I said, when you arrange a collection, it's meant to go on the nature strip out the front of your own house, not across the road in the park. So I said, I'll send this through and we'll make sure they'll be able to check whether it's on the system or not. So I took the photo, sent the email, went off the Albert Jacka thing and came back. When I was going to the car, I thought, I'll drive past, see if it's still there. And he picked it all up and taken it all home and all that sort of thing. So the point I'm trying to make is it's not necessarily the caravans and it's not necessarily the trailers who are dumping rubbish in these streets, although they do get blamed for a lot of the stuff that happens in our municipality. But I know in this particular street, it may not necessarily be them if that resident that still lives in the same house he was living in a few years back. So happy to support this because I think we do need to look at this because it probably has gotten out of hand in this street. If it was 1 or 2 or 3, we probably wouldn't care. And there's plenty of other streets where there's 1 or 2 or 3 boats or trailers or caravans. But when it gets to the point where it is on this particular street, I think it's time we do something. And maybe we're just chasing caravans around our municipality, but we certainly need to look at that and see what we can do.
Great. Councillor Niagri?
I'd like to move an amendment.
Okay.
I'd like to add after St Kilda East, including through local law amendments that apply municipality-wide.
I might have to declare a conflict of interest if it's municipality-wide. No, it's not. The common interest, okay.
That was it.
I own a caravan, guys.
Including via local law amendments that apply municipality-wide.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, would you like to ask a clarifying question?
Maybe could it be a separate point? I'm worried if we have to wait for a report for that, it will take much longer than perhaps a trial or a quick solution for Alexandra Street. Happy to look at the broader thing, but I just want to donate a concern about the timing.
I don't know if that's a clarifying question or a recommendation to you. Would you like it as a separate point?
If officers are happy to divide it into 2.
Yeah, can we make it a second line? Sorry, I know that's formatting, but thank you. All right, so okay, so I've got an amendment. Niagri, who would like to second that? I've seconded Martin. All right. Okay, now we're only debating on the amendment. Okay, thank you. Would you like to speak to it, Councillor Niagri?
Yeah, just briefly. I just hate it when we've all just acknowledged there's a problem. We've all just identified a way that we might solve it, and then we've said, oh, we might look at doing that in the future. We can do that now. If there's other municipalities in particular that have done that, I wasn't aware of that. That sounds like a really fantastic and potentially quite simple solution to this that will actually solve this problem across the municipality. I understand people have limited off-street parking, but our streets are not a caravan park. They're not trailer parking, and in this street it's particularly pronounced, but it is actually a problem across the municipality, and I'd hate to us to solve this problem in one street and it just pops up somewhere else. So although I think we do need to get on with maybe just a temporary solution for Alexandra Street, I think we also need to be putting our best foot forward and trying to find a long-term solution.
Thank you. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to the amendment? They're working on it.
We removed Bond and replaced Bond with Martin.
Yeah, sorry.
And while that's happening,
they might have misheard me.
There've been occasional issues in Gateway Ward with people complaining about large vehicles, caravans, and since the article appeared in the paper the other day, I've had 2 further complaints, and the Beacon Cove Neighbourhood Association contacted me by email as well. So it's certainly a municipality-wide issue, and I thank Councillor Niagri for broadening the scope of the original notice of motion.
Councillor Baxter?
One, I'd just like to ask a clarifying question of the officers and perhaps of the mover of the amendment. Is the intention that this consideration of a local law amendment would be as part of our normal local law review, or that this would be a separate local law review?
I think given we've just done one, it would probably be separate. I think at first we would need to scope the problem, which is the intention here, and then if we want to then proceed to a formal local law amendment process, we can do that.
Officers to confirm?
Through you, Mayor, the intention I would do in the first instance would be to review the feasibility and requirements, like how of implementing such a thing, and then there would be a secondary step around how we would implement it if you want us to. So the first step that we'll report back on, is it feasible? How would you go about it? How effective would it be? Are there any unintended consequences, for instance? And then there'd be a separate decision about whether you'd want us to progress it, and the best way to do that, obviously a change in the local law is a bit of a process, and we've just done that.
Okay, thank you. I'll speak now. Yeah. Look, I'll support this amendment, but I am a little bit worried about tying this into the specific issue around Alexandra Street. I do think that looking at these vehicles and how they're classified in the future is something that I've wanted to do, but it actually has been brought up in the past on this council and didn't get much traction. I remember Councillor Clark talking about it. I remember me talking about it, but it never really got particularly far. So I would have preferred to consider this, actually get all of our ducks in a row and look at it through our next local law amendment rather than a separate process. But I suppose we can do it this way. I'm just a little bit worried that it won't be as considered as if we did it as part of our local law review. But anyway, I'll support the amendment, I suppose.
All right, Councillor Sirkoff. Do you have your microphone on?
Thank you. Just a clarifying question on the amendment. Since we're going from one street to one area really to a municipality wide, does that mean that council could be looking at different solutions of addressing this problem depending on where it is across in a particular part of the city? Because one size might not fit all in terms of a solution for that particular street.
Through you, Mayor. Yes.
That we're looking at several solutions and do not apply the same solution across the whole municipality.
Through you, Mayor, we would look at the range of solutions that would be available, and then as part of that we'd assess where they might be most applicable, like is it a citywide kind of solution, or might this apply in a particular location depending on the type of problem that you have in a particular location. So there's a little bit of thinking for us to do. It's early days. It has been recognised that several councillors, Councillor Crawford and others, have asked us as officers already to do some work on this, which has been commenced, and we will continue to do further work on it. We recognise that there's an issue, and it's a growing issue, and we haven't quite got the tools in front of us that we think right now will help us to resolve it. So we need to do some further work on it.
All right, anybody else speaking to the amendment? Okay, I'll just quickly add that as quoted in the newspaper, it is like a game of sardines, and I think there's a lot of people testing the water to see if this is allowed, and it often happens around the reserves because people are a little bit self-conscious of going, well, I don't want to impose on anybody, but no one's parked outside that reserve, so it's kind of fair game. So it is something that we need to grapple with, how we can address the growing concern. I'm a caravaner, I own a caravan, and so it would be interesting to see how that changes. But I think it's also fair that people can't privatise our spaces. I personally think that cars with flat tyres, even if they're registered, shouldn't be allowed just parked on the street for years on years. Because it's just the ability that people are moving and that we're having changeover. That's the point of a lot of our public space. So I will support the amendment because I think it's important that other people around the community have that same feeling that it's being addressed in their area. Anybody else in the amendment? Otherwise, taking the vote. Pearl, would you go on the vote? Are you voting or question? Okay, all those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you for the amendment. Now we're going to the substantive, which includes the amendment. So the people have spoken. I have recorded our Crawford, Baxter, Bond. Everyone else is allowed to speak to the substantive if you need to. Anybody else need to speak to the substantive? Otherwise, we'll go to the vote again. All right, all those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Thank you. All right, thank you. Last item in the public meeting. We've got, well, not really, but okay. 14.2 is a notice of motion raised by Councillor Crawford again in relation to Elster Creek. So we'll go through the movers and seconders and then we'll ask questions. Councillor Crawford, you'd like to move this, and Councillor Baxter would like to second it?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Any questions? Can you wave yes or no, Councillor Baxter? Oh, you nodded, sorry. Okay, then questions on this item. Councillor Nyagui, question.
I just wanted to clarify from officers whether anything in this notice of motion would enable officers or council more generally to spend money on assets that are not ours.
Who's going to take this?
Lauren? I can. Through you, Mayor. I guess the work that we're looking at doing here will be the information that we need to make an informed decision. The intent is not that we spend money on litter traps that are within Melbourne Water's assets. It's a conversation we would have with Melbourne Water.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford?
Again, probably should have asked this before. There has been a question. It does seem like a lot of money, 5K, to audit our gross pollutant traps. Is that really the figure, or is it up to that amount? Is it a really expensive exercise?
Through you, Mayor. That particular piece of work is being undertaken by the assets team, so I wasn't involved in getting that quote, but my understanding is that it is an estimate or an estimate at this point, so we will get a firmed up quote.
Okay. Lachlan?
Through you, Mayor. So in order to audit them, some of the access points to the GPTs might be in the road, so we need to do traffic management to be able to open them up, see whether they're operating, see whether the baskets are actually intact, and collecting the material. So that's why it's an estimate. It actually is quite intensive to actually go out there and lift the lids in the middle of the road, pull it all up with confined space entry.
Could I ask a follow-up question, please, Mayor? Yeah. Lachlan, how often is part of the information we can get is how often we empty them as part of that? Thank you.
Lachlan?
Through you, Mayor. So gross pollutant, I know we've gone and emptied them all recently. It's I suppose it's relatively obvious that you need to empty them as often as they fill up. So some of them do collect a lot of pollutants, so they need to be emptied at a much higher frequency than others that might only need to be done once a year. So the audit will help us ensure that those gross pollutant traps are not just operating, but also give us an idea of the amount of pollution, the amount of gross pollutants that are in them, so that we can try and optimise how often we send the vacuum truck out to clean them up.
Okay. I'll ask a question about community involvement. There was somebody wanting to see if they could have that when we're working with the various authorities, if community can be an arm of that.
Through you, Mayor.
Yes, Beth?
The collaboration that's taking place that the resident referred to is the collaboration being led by Melbourne Water, and we are a participant in it. We are meeting with that community group in the coming weeks, and we will talk to Melbourne Water about opportunities to get the community more involved in the collaboration.
Thank you. Anybody else speaking to the item? Or asking questions, clarifying questions? Sorry. Okay, if not, we'll go into debate. Councillor Crawford, your motion, you can start.
So I guess council, over the last 8 years being on council, we've had a focus on flooding and probably water quality going out to the bay, but not as much on litter as we should have. That's not to say, as Gill mentioned, the many fabulous groups who really help in the community, of which I'm a member: Elwood Plogging, Love Our Streets, Beach Patrol. And now the new entrance, the ECAT, which we welcome. And ECAT has really kind of put on the radar the litter that's going out to the bay via the drains and the Elster Creek. So I thank you for, one, staying very late tonight to hear this debate, but also kind of bringing attention to this particular aspect of the litter and raising its profile so that we are starting to have those bigger conversations with the other councils and Melbourne Water. So bringing this motion tonight is about acknowledging that work that's happening, but also moving it forward and giving clear direction to officers that, although we've been working on the flooding aspect, now we can, as part of that, look at the litter aspect. I mean, it is unfortunately, there's many wicked problems that we have in council, and there's complexity from upstream, and that we are not the direct asset owners. But how do we collectively work together to resolve this, this problem? And that is the conversation we need to have. Obviously, there is the wider, and if anyone can solve this, how do we get people not to drop the litter in the first place, or to clean up their little patch in front of their house or business so it doesn't end up in the drain as a starting point? That would be an even better solution if we can figure that out as part of this process. So, councillors, I'm urging you to support this motion because we have very committed community members raising this issue, and it is very timely that we put our focus there, given that the litter never seems to abate, and we need to play our part in resolving this issue.
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Mayor. So happy to support this motion. It is a tricky one. We do not own the asset. It's a Melbourne Water asset. And we will only ever be able to work in partnership or through advocacy. But as Councillor Crawford said, litter is definitely something that needs a bit of a focus at the moment. But I would caution against too much focus there. The upstream issues that we have, it's not necessarily people littering, although that's certainly part of it. But the sheer amount of litter that is produced in the first place when it comes to packaging and products and that sort of thing. We need to really continue to advocate to the levels of government that regulate that to do better, because it is far too cheap for businesses and organisations to churn out the kind of crap that's flowing into our waterways. So we should always remember that, because if all you're doing is picking up litter, that's all you'll ever be doing. We do need to tackle it at the source as well. But having said that, litter is still a problem, and it still needs to be picked up. And like Councillor Crawford, I'm very appreciative of the volunteer groups that do that. But we may need to investigate larger scale sort of solutions on this one. So that's why I'm happy to work on that. When it comes to Councillor Nyagui's concerns around cost or cost shifting in this one, that is always a concern. It's always something on my mind. But I think you also get, with partnerships, you get lots of multiplier benefits as well that end up reducing your costs. So hopefully we can straddle that line where we get the benefits of partnerships without necessarily having to pay for things that we shouldn't need to.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak to the item? Councillor Nyagui?
I will support this tonight, though I don't know that this is necessarily, as some of the things that Councillor Baxter just said, the full answer. Ultimately, I think we probably need to, we definitely need to ban plastic. It doesn't break down, and its impact on the environment is just incalculable. And as much as we can try to put in gross pollutant traps and all the other kind of systems in place in our waterways, we will continue to be choked with plastic until such time as we stop making it. I was learning about this recently because council officers briefed me for a presentation I made to one of the local schools, but about 85% of it's microplastics, which we can't collect, obviously, through gross pollutant traps. It's truly mind-boggling the amount of rubbish that goes into the bay every year and the damage it does on its way there. And so I think although it's important that we do this, we need to also be sober-eyed about the fact that this is not a problem we can fix alone, and it's one that hopefully governments at a higher level will address over time. And that said, I think though, there are lots of opportunities, as Councillor Baxter says, to collaboration And I think it's important that we're always trying to do as much as we can within our realm, while also being sober about the fact, I think clear with the community, because I think there's often an expectation out in the community that if we do better traps at the end of a particular drain or a particular waterway, we're able to actually stop all the rubbish going into the bay. That's just not the case. We can reduce it, particularly larger things. I think that's an important part of the process. But we also need to be clear that ultimately we need a much larger system change. And I hate saying that because it kind of sounds like buck passing, but we also have to be honest, it's plastic that is the problem here, and hopefully one day we won't have lots of plastic going down our waterways and into the bay.
Would anybody else like to speak to it? I might add I recently did a 50k walk along the surf coast of Mornington Peninsula, and I could maybe say I saw 5 pieces of rubbish. It was pristine, unbelievable for a surf coast, the amount of where that water has potential to come from. On the flip side, I walk the dog beach in Port Melbourne, 200 yards, and I pick up bags and bags and bags of rubbish. It's insane, the juxtaposition of those two environments. Where the rubbish is coming from is obviously in the urban environment, through our catchments, getting into the bay and washing back up. So any opportunity to stop it, I think that the opportunity here to stop it at the source, stop it before people would take it home at the source, and at this last opportunity before it enters the bay, we need to do what we can to make sure we can stop it, because it's not good. So thank you. I'm hoping that there's some success here in learning some things that we can implement across the municipality, because I know that this is not the only creek that has the issue. Princess Street Drain, I would love to have a trap there as well. So I'll be supporting this tonight. Anybody else want to speak to it? All right, let's go to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimous. Great, thank you. All right. Reports by councillors delegates. Who's willing to say something tonight? Okay, on to urgent items of business. Councillors, any items of urgent business? No. Confidential matters. Councillors, we have 4 confidential reports listed on the agenda, being 1, 17.1 VCAT matter, 17.2 Park Street Streetscape Improvement Project and Road Reconstruction, 17.3 Shrine to Sea Master Plan Advocacy and Implementation, 17.4 Legal Matter. I now call on the councillor to move the meeting be closed to members of the public. Thank you, Councillor Nyagri, to consider the confidential items, and seconded by Councillor Pearl. All right. I will now put a motion to the, on this. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Councillors, we will now conclude the public part of this meeting. I advise members of the public that there are no further open items to be discussed. This will be the conclusion of the public meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you, everyone online. Thank you, the